Welcome everybody to the Local and Regional Governments Day of the High Level Political Forum 2021. Our constituency has been meeting for a couple of days. This is our third day, and I would say our big day. It is a tradition for local and regional governments to gather during a specific day in every process of policy making of the United Nations and the international community. We have started doing this during the COPs, and we have carried on during doing that also in other processes. So we are delighted that you are able to join us today. Local and regional governments have been working day in, day out as part of the global multilateral system as well, to ensure that the ambitions that we have set for ourselves in 2015 come to be true, that we achieve the objectives of sustainability and development. And today we are going to be discussing our inputs to the high-level political forum, the contents of our statements, our priorities, but also the findings of our annual report on localization. As you know, our self-organized constituency under the Global Task Force puts together a report that follows up the progress around localization, the voluntary local reviews, the voluntary subnational reviews. But before kicking off and going to the president of the United Nations Advisory Committee on Local Authorities, UNACLA, Mayor of Kazan, and also president of our Euro-Asian section, I would like to start with a rather very sad message for our municipal global movement. We have heard this morning that the mayor of Johannesburg has passed away from COVID. Many, many local governments around the world are suffering from this. Many mayors and councillors are passing away together with many, many inhabitants of our planet. And for them, just a minute's silence. Thank you, colleagues. Mayor Makubo was a very active member of United Cities and Local Governments. He led our work around financing and has always been a strong participant of our global movement. We couldn't start this meeting without a reference to him, to his daughter, his mother, his wife, the whole of the family of Johannesburg. So thank you for that. Since we know that failure is not an option and we need to continue fighting, we are going to make the best out of this Local and Regional Governments Day, full of hope, but full of resolve as well to make the transformation that we need. And now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mayor Ilsur Metzing, Mayor of Kazan and President of UNACLA. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Благодарю, Эмилия. Добрый день, уважаемые представители Организации Объединенных Наций, уважаемые коллеги, мэры, губернаторы, уважаемые партнеры из глобальной целевой группы местных и региональных властей, уважаемые коллеги и партнеры. Эмилия, вместе с вами примите соболезнования от жителей Казани, жителями Йоханнесбурга. Мы действительно, к сожалению, за это время потеряли нескольких наших коллег, и это еще раз говорит о том, насколько важно нам вместе бороться и на уровне местных и региональных властей с пандемией и использовать наши лучшие практики. От имени представителей местных и региональных органов власти в рамках Дня местных и региональных властей, Дня откровенного обмена мнениями между нашими представителями и всеми партнерами в целях ускорения локализации универсальной повестки дня в области устойчивого развития. Для нас это также возможность объединить усилия, чтобы вместе обсудить и сформировать представление о том, как вовлечь всех в реализацию нашей общей повестки дня. В течение недели более 70 местных политических представителей и 200 практиков будут делиться своим опытом. День местных и региональных властей инициирован в 2019 году глобальной целевой группой местных и региональных властей для того, чтобы наш голос был услышан при принятии важнейших решений в рамках международных процессов. Мы также рассчитываем на ваше активное участие в форуме и местных и региональных властей 2021 года, который пройдет на следующей неделе, 12 и 13 июля. 6 лет назад международное сообщество утвердило цели устойчивого развития. 5 лет тому назад появилась новая городская повестка дня. Итоговая декларация конференции по жилью и устойчивому городскому развитию в Кито подчеркивает роль новой городской повестки дня для важнейшего катализатора достижения цели устойчивого развития, как предпосылки для преобразования. Его потенциал в качестве ускорителя достижения ЦУР нельзя недооценивать, и это напоминание о том, что только путем локализации действий мы сможем достичь всех глобальных целей. Того, что мы делали до сих пор, к сожалению, недостаточно. Пандемия COVID-19 усугубила неравенство и оказала драматическое воздействие на все аспекты жизни. На этом фоне именно местные и региональные власти доказали свою приверженность обеспечению предоставления услуг и решения повседневных проблем, вызванных пандемией. Наш 5-й доклад политическому форуму высокого уровня показывает, что местные и региональные власти, несмотря на то, что боролись за сохранение доступа к основным услугам на протяжении всей пандемии, демонстрируя, что предоставление базовых услуг является краеугольным камнем ответных мер в области здравоохранения. Здравоохранение и основные услуги идут рука об руку и должны быть в центре нашего внимания на пути восстановления после пандемии. Если мы смогли сделать заботу о гражданах приоритетом во время наихудшего периода пандемии, мы можем и должны делать это по мере восстановления. В докладе также освещаются проблемы, с которыми сталкиваются местные и региональные власти при участии в процессах мониторинга и отчетности. Местные и региональные власти участвовали только в 37% добровольных национальных обзоров, и их участие сильно варьировалось в разных регионах, и это было относительно выше только в Европе и Азиатско-Тихоокеанском регионе. Важно усилить участие местных и региональных властей в национальной отчетности для обеспечения учета всех мнений в процессе локализации ЦУР и повышения их ответственности за реализацию целей, которые достижимы только на местном уровне. Наконец, наш отчет показывает, что многоуровневое сотрудничество и координация имеют решающее значение, и в некоторых случаях необходимо пересмотреть и модернизировать систему управления. Местные и региональные власти должны участвовать во всех стратегиях восстановления, в частности, в национальных программах восстановления для обеспечения всеобщего охвата. Вот почему крайне важно не только вовлекать местные и региональные органы власти в процесс восстановления, но и налаживать прочные партнерские отношения для локализации универсальных программ развития. Крайне важно обеспечить проведение необходимых реформ для расширения прав и возможностей местных и региональных властей, обеспечение равного доступа к основным услугам. Проблемы остаются серьезными, но наша приверженность к их решению непоколебима, и опыт показал, что для восстановления нам необходимо участие всех. Вот почему мы призываем к созданию новой системы, в которой местные и региональные власти будут в полной мере задействованы, занимая постоянное место за столом принятия решений. Для формирования сильного международного сообщества, отвечающего потребностям и вызовам сегодняшнего дня, обновленная система ООН должна включать местные и региональные власти на всех этапах и во всех процессах принятия решения. Наши представители по-прежнему готовы наводить мосты с международным сообществом и системой ООН. ЮНАКЛА может сыграть важную роль в обеспечении этого и стать инструментом для обеспечения признания местных и региональных властей в обзоре и последующей деятельности в связи с реализацией новой городской повестки дня. Я с большим интересом жду всех сегодняшних ваших выступлений, уважаемые коллеги. Желаю всем участникам плодотворного обмена мнениями, эффективного взаимодействия. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Thank you very much, President and Chair of UNACLA, for these thoughtful remarks, also for your commitment to ensure that UNACLA becomes a very important tool as part of our enhanced role in the United Nations. I am very pleased now to give the floor to Mami Mitsutori, a special representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and head of UNDRR. Mami is a long-standing friend of the family of local and regional governments. We have put resilience, dear special representative, at the heart of the actions of many local and regional governments of the world, but we need to do more, and we are delighted to start this Local and Regional Governments Day with you with us. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Distinguished participants, at the outset, I would like to convey my heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Mayor Makubo and the citizens of Johannesburg for your tremendous loss. I would like to then congratulate members of the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments on convening the Local and Regional Governments Day, bringing together delegations of local and regional governments and presenting the annual Global Task Force report on localizing the SDGs. The presence and voices of local governments is indeed so important for the HLPF process. As your report focuses on SDG 3 health, may I start by saying that the need for innovation and transformation in how urban risk is managed has been brought home to us all by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of lives have been lost. Just this week, the number of mortality caused by the pandemic has surpassed 4 million people. Many more have fallen ill. There have been $12 trillion in economic losses, and an estimated 100 million people have been pushed back into poverty. The enormity of this ongoing catastrophe
can you hear me?
cries out for us to apply to lessons learned, and nowhere else is it so important to tackle this challenge than in cities, in local governments, because, as we all know, by the year 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will be urban. Managing urban risk and building urban resilience to disasters, street by street, city by city, is the challenge of this century. How our cities develop with resilience, built or not, is going to be key to achieving the SDGs, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Paris Agreement, and the new Urban Agenda. Over the past decade, through the Making Cities Resilient campaign, more than 4,300 cities and local governments raised their awareness on the need for prevention and resilience. But now we have to scale up this initiative while moving from advocacy to an action-oriented agenda. And this is why in October last year, UCLG, ICLEI, the Resilient Cities Network, UN Habitat, and many, many others have joined forces to launch the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative, MCR 2030. Cities that signed up to MCR 2030 will have access to tools and services provided by a wide range of partners throughout their journey towards resilience. The online MCR 2030 dashboard provides the space for interaction between partners and cities. Since MCR 2030 became operational in February this year, 168 cities have joined, representing over 81 million people. We are encouraged by the strong interest of cities and local governments, but we need to pick up the pace during this important time when we need to work together to get out from the pandemic and recover. So let me conclude by asking you to consider joining up to MCR 2030 If you have not yet done so, in order to build your own resilience and to also help other cities to build their resilience through city-to-city exchanges, sharing your experiences in learning, do please become a member of MCR 2030. As the pandemic is showing us, we are all in this together, and we can only get out of the crisis together. This is also true in the case of climate emergency, and this is what we will be discussing at today's event, that the achievement of any and all of the global goals requires strong partnership at all levels. I look forward to your discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Special Representative. We certainly hope that many will follow your invitation. We are going to be sharing the information on the initiative on the chat. We have a long road ahead, but you are absolutely right that we need to put resilience at the heart of what we do. If we want to get out of this crisis and be ready for many crises to come that we don't exactly know how they will look like, but there will be next challenges. Thank you again for your presence here, but above all for all the support that you are providing to thousands and thousands of local and regional governments around the world. So let's go now to the next segment of this day. I am very pleased to have two female colleagues presenting the outcomes of our report. We just come out of the Generation Equality Forum in Paris, and United Cities and Local Governments, my organization, but the Global Task Force as a whole is very committed to promoting a feminist municipal movement, more women in public life and leadership. And I have very good examples coming up that are going to be presenting to us the outcomes of the findings of one of our key products in this high-level political forum. We come with a joint statement that we presented 2 days ago, and that we will be presenting again during the high-level political forum, local and regional governments forum, starting on Monday and Tuesday. But today we want to pay particular attention to the findings of our annual report. As you know, UCLG, for the Global Task Force, and with the collaboration of all the networks, the 27 networks that you see here under in your screen, produces a report that follows up how well we are doing or how bad we are doing in the localization of the SDGs, and what kind of impact is that having in the voluntary national reviews. And to give us an overview, a quick one on what we have found and what it means for the respective organization, we have with us the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Local Governments Forum, Lucy Slacks, and then we will also give the floor to Bernardia Chandret-Previ, Secretary General of United Cities and Local Government ASPAC. We will start with you, Lucy. We need to be a little bit strict with time. If you can keep it to 4 minutes, it would be wonderful.
Thanks very much, Amelia, and distinguished colleagues. It's a pleasure to join you. And just quickly allow me to add our condolences to Johannesburg on the death of Mem Makubo. It's terribly sad news, and I think it really shows how local government is very much on the front line of the pandemic still in its work. And that's something I want to just touch on quickly in my remarks. So first, this is a really exciting day to be talking about the report on towards the localization of the SDGs. As everybody knows, this is something which is produced on an annual basis. And I think the first thing is a huge congratulations to the team for producing, again, a really amazing piece of work, which really helps us, I think, to map the progress that we're making in terms of localization. We know it hasn't been a linear journey. And I think that this report in many ways does show up the context in which it was written. And I think, you know, we have already talked about it in the opening, that this year has been a year of the global pandemic, and it's had a devastating effect on us globally. And the previous speaker mentioned many of the statistics, which I was going to draw attention to, but I think I won't do that. But I will just draw attention to the fact that even before the pandemic, we were struggling in terms of achieving the SDGs. There was already a strong discussion around how we could accelerate achievement of the SDGs. So that statistic which the previous speaker gave, around an extra 120 million people being pushed into poverty as a result of the pandemic, I think is stark. And I think it's something that our movement is very keen to play a very active role in addressing through localization of the SDGs. And I think in many ways our experience of the pandemic, the feedback from this report, really shows that nobody can do this alone. There's no one part of government that can do this. It's not something civil society or local government can do. We absolutely have to move together collectively. And we have to really give some meaning to the context of multi-level governance. We read it throughout the SDGs, we read it throughout the Agenda 2030. And I think we really need to use this sort of transformational moment, this moment where we're all looking at how we build back better, how we build back differently, and we would certainly argue how we build back local, to really make some of those partnerships at with different levels of government, with other stakeholders, very meaningful. As we know, local governments have played a key role in the pandemic. And I think one of the things that's been very evident is the breadth of services which local governments deliver, which are directly impacting on the health, safety, security, and resilience of our local communities. We talk a lot in the context of the pandemic about health, but local governments also involved in water, sanitation, waste management, drainage, reaching out to communities, making sure that the poorest don't go without. So I think, you know, the social inequalities that we know are there have been further deepened by this pandemic. And equally, this report tells us that local government has a very strong role to play in that recovery. I wanted to pull out the fact that the report does headline many examples of good practice, but it does also show that local governments are less involved in some of the national reporting mechanisms currently than they perhaps have been at other points in the process. And I think we need to take that head on. I think we need to respond to that as a global movement, and we have to think about the steps which we can take. And you'll see in the report that we do make some very practical recommendations around how we feel that as a community, as a sector, local government could be enabled and supported to play a fuller role in this. And I would draw your attention to 2 or 3 things. One is the need to really align global policies with practical plans and commitments at the local level and the national level. How do we link those plans together? You talked about Sendai in your earlier comments. We've talked a lot about the Paris Agreement. How do we align those things better? And how do we position local government to be able to do that? How do we strengthen local government's role in those coordinating mechanisms? We are starting to see, in terms of climate change, we're starting to see much more of a focus on local government engaging in national commitments. We need to do that with the SDGs. We need to really position local governments to be able to take on that role. And then, as we are doing, we need our global community to be saying this to the UN, to other international global partners. And I think importantly, as a sector, we need to also build our relationships with other levels of government. And we need to ensure that we take this transformational moment to kind of really deepen the relationships with other levels of government. And I think also we need national governments to focus on the contribution that local government has made and think about all of those things that need to happen for us to be able to walk together and work together and join together towards our shared objective, I think, of leaving no one behind, whether that's financing, whether that's empowerment, whether that's what I've just talked about in terms of those recommendations. I think it's really important that we also, as local and regional governments, as international organizations, absolutely take that on board. And I think this report, you know, really gives us a very clear direction as to where we need to go next.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I would now go to my colleague, the Secretary General of UCLG, ASPAC, Every year there is a set of goals that is being reviewed. Not all of them are under revision, and in particular this year the goal on health is very important, and it takes also a very important role in the report. Bernardia, the floor is yours for the next 4 to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Distinguished mayors, speakers, participants, UCLG families and partners, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. And it's really a big pleasure for me to join you today. And first of all, I also like to convey our big condolences to the family and people in Johannesburg, and of course, UCLG Africa, for the death of the mayors of Johannesburg. This is still a struggle that we face. The COVID-19 is still here. Even in Jakarta, we have been asked to start working from home again. The number of cases in the virus second wave has increased. Like yesterday itself, the cases reached 38,000 cases with 800 to 1,000 died in just 24 hours. So this is the reality what we are facing now. But let's be optimistic that we can all overcome these most challenging times that we have been facing in our history. But please allow me to offer my congratulations to UCLG team, Emilia, Egado, and the team, and all the global task force partners of having completed this GTF annual report on the towards the localization of the SDGs. Localization of the SDGs is a critical priority to guide our actions in not only fighting for the pandemic, but in working towards a sustainable future. This is the moment. So with let me just share also with you some of the experiences here in Asia Pacific. With support from the EU, UCLG ASPAC, and our partners have recently implemented 2 programs on the localization of SDGs in Indonesia and Pakistan. We also contributed on the report carrying out the survey in Asia Pacific regions and in several countries in Asia Pacific regions. A number of findings have emerged from these programs. The COVID crisis has had adverse socio-economic effects on subnational governments, local and regional, and the progress in the localizing of SDGs. However, the impacts of the crisis experience have been varied in terms of governance, in terms of finance and actions towards attaining the SDGs. So localization of SDGs will succeed. Localization of SDGs will succeed if we have conducive environment in the country, particularly. These include regulatory frameworks, institutional capacity, as well as the financial options. And all those dimensions are already analyzed in the reports. So contributions of local and regional governments towards the SDGs 3 are well recorded in the report that we also released, such as the first, together with UCLG, the first Indonesian VSR from the subnational review, and the first PLR in the country, which is a PLR Surabaya that is partnered with UN ISCAP. This has been included, both of them have been included in Indonesian VNR that was also reported on the United Nations as HLPF. So further, we found important policy recommendations proposed to national and local policymakers and stakeholders that we also push for them in Indonesia. These include, I think Lucy already mentioned, strengthen multi-level and cross-sectoral governance and coordinations to manage the pandemic and post-pandemic impact, while also accelerating the SDGs implementation. So the second policy recommendation is explore and introduce financial management measures and fiscal tools to reduce subnational financial imbalance and restore fiscal stability. And the third, upscale the use of ICT to accelerate the digitalization of services, address digital divide, and subsequently to bring transparency. So to build a safe, just green recovery, the recovery package from the COVID pandemics are vital for local and regional governments to enact measures to fight the impact of COVID-19 and accelerate this sustainable recovery. So it should link not only to the health issue, but other SDGs as well. For example, the fact shows that the number of countries with renewable energy support policy didn't increase from the previous year, although there are many more cities committed to adopt renewable energy strategies in 2020. So cross-linking SDGs and their targets to affect multiple benefits at the local level is a key to better uptake on the SDGs. So let me conclude here. To answer to the rising global energy demand, it will be critical also to reduce consumptions and investment of new fossil fuels. However, investment in fossil fuels outlined in the COVID-19 recovery package are 6 times greater than the level of investment allocated to renewable energy. So we really need to revert these trends. So therefore, to build back better and stronger recovery package should align with sustainable development, green jobs, and social protections. These are essential in accelerating the SDGs attainment. It is crucial, of course, to be ambitious in our actions, but we need a clear and strong long-term visions. And most important is to put this ambitious into action. So this is as shown in the report, many countries, local governments are even more ambitious than national government in the initiative. Many cities in Japan, Korea, South Korea, China, they are also taking initiative. So finally, I would also to underline that our involvement in the reporting process, particularly thanks to the voluntary subnational and local reports, this has strengthened the acknowledgement of our initiative by national governments. The voluntary national report presented this year by the Indonesian government for the first time mentioned the role of local government association. I think this has strengthened the dialogue between different levels of government. So thank you. Please also, I wish you a safe and healthy future and success in all your endeavors. Thank you. Back to you, Emilia.
Thank you very much, Bernardia. You know, the methodology that is followed by the team is to issue surveys. We see members of the Global Task Force like Platforma and CMR are also sharing the findings of the European report in the chat. We received 263 surveys this year from 92 countries. 28 of them are countries that are reporting this year. So the information that we get is very, very relevant. You have the link to the report in the chat. It's really worth looking at it. And what we are going to do now, and is going to be facilitated by Frédéric Vallier, the Secretary General of the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, is to get the political perspective out of this. As you know, next week we are going to have sessions also specifically focusing on the voluntary local reviews and the voluntary subnational reviews, many of which are mentioned here in this report. We invite you to follow those sessions as well, a very intensive calendar of our constituency. Frédéric, thank you for joining us. I leave us all in your able hands with a very interesting panel.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Thank you very much, Emilia. And let me also convey my condolences to the people of Johannesburg and to the friends and colleagues from South Africa and from the family of local governments. But this shows also that the crisis, as my colleague Lucy and Bernardia said, is still there. And probably we have to think out of the box in this matter, because we see that crises are in a way ongoing, and maybe the state of crisis is a permanent one. If we think of the climate crisis, of course the COVID crisis, and other that could easily pop up. So maybe it's a phase of civilization and humanity when we have to take on board the challenges, the risk, and the difficulties that we have to tackle. And certainly those who have to tackle it the most are the ones on the ground. And I'm happy to have with us today in this panel discussion people who are acting on the ground in delivering public policies in their constituencies or in their organizations. So we have with us today, I believe, Almudena Mello, who is the Secretary General of UCI. UCI is the Union of Capital City, Iberian Capital City. Jean-Marc Yasset, qui est le maire de Cocody. Je ne le vois pas, mais je pense qu'il est là. Pablo Jurado, president of Congope. And we have Gunn-Marit Helgersen. Gunn-Marit, hello, who is the first vice president of the Norwegian Association of Municipalities and Regions and co-president of the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, but also, I should say, very involved in the Congress of Local and Regional Governments in the Council of Europe. And finally, we have also Valérie Dumontet. Bonjour, Madame la Vice-Présidente. Valérie est vice-présidente du département de l'Aude en France. I'm sorry, I have to cut my interpretation. Sorry for that. Donc Valérie est vice-présidente d'un département. Les départements en France sont les pouvoirs intermédiaires et elle est également très investie dans nos réseaux, mais aussi dans la vie locale, puisqu'elle est aussi élue locale en plus de son mandat de vice-présidente du département. Donc, I will maybe start by my colleague from UCI. Oops, why did I close my camera now? Sorry. A little problem of connection. I'm sorry. So, Almudena Mello, I would like maybe to start with you by asking about solidarity and cooperation. How those two elements can be integrated in the principles of delivering in the SDGs, but also in the recovery plans. After this crisis, we see that there is a need for inventing a new model of development based on resilient and recovery plans, certainly in Europe, but also in the rest of the world. So how do you integrate this in your work and in capital cities? We don't hear you. I think there is a problem of...
¿Ahora?
Oh, yes, sí.
Okay. Gracias, Frederic. Bueno, lo primero, unirme a las condolencias por el fallecimiento del alcalde de Johannesburgo y también todo mi ánimo a la familia y a los compatriotas del alcalde. Buenos días y buenas tardes a todos. Hoy, como decía Frederic, y es un gusto estar hoy aquí con todos en la apertura del Día de los Gobiernos y regionales en el marco de este foro político de alto nivel 2021, participando como secretaria general de la Unión de Ciudades Capitales Iberoamericanas, dando voz a lo que son las 29 ciudades que forman parte de la Organización Mundial de la Organización de la UCI, desde hace 40 años que existimos, representando y siendo la voz de todos ellos en el mundo. Es por ello que, como decía Frederic, la importancia que tienen ahora las alianzas estratégicas, nosotros lo llevamos desarrollando ya desde hace 40 años, ¿no? Tan importantes son esas alianzas de las ciudades que formamos Iberoamérica, pero también la importancia que tiene que estas alianzas vayan más allá con organismos como el que soy yo ahora mismo aquí, con el sector privado, con el sector público, que es el lugar central que ha ocupado siempre a la UCI, la labor de la UCI. Por tanto, quisiera resaltar que tiene para nosotros una especial importancia este foro como organización miembro del Global Task Force de CGLU, nuestro compromiso sólido y este rol activo que queremos desarrollar, este trabajo coordinado en red. Desde la UCI, nuestro trabajo siempre ha ido muy alineado en cumplir esos objetivos de la Agenda 2030. Apoyamos gobiernos locales desde nuestra región en un sinfín de iniciativas que para favorecer el crecimiento económico y la sostenibilidad en la línea de cumplir esas metas 2020. Y es nuestra convicción que los desafíos globales necesitan también de respuestas innovadoras llevadas a cabo de manera conjunta, a través de alianzas para que sean efectivas y sostenibles. La Alianza Mundial para el Desarrollo Sostenible, establecida en la ODS 17, no podrá conseguirse si no es por medio de la cooperación internacional y las asociaciones sólidas. Por tanto, ahí la importancia que tiene que todos trabajemos de manera unida. Y el compromiso, en ese sentido, de la Organización de Ciudades Capitales Iberoamericanas, en ese sentido, tiene una larga trayectoria, porque llevamos años impulsando proyectos de cooperación que contribuyen al fortalecimiento institucional y al apoyo de políticas locales. Particularmente me gustaría destacar el proyecto, por ejemplo, que está desarrollando ahora mismo, promovido por Sao Paulo, con la Ciudad de México y Buenos Aires, como ciudades asociadas, para mejorar y consolidar las estrategias de monitoreo, que también es importante, de esos objetivos de la ODS y de su localización a nivel local. Y para ello estamos trabajando en capacitar a los funcionarios y apoyar la elaboración de los informes de revisión voluntaria de estas ciudades. Primera etapa para potenciar el desarrollo de una plataforma de las ODS. En el ámbito de la salud y el bienestar, el objetivo número 3 de la Agenda 2030, los desafíos generados por la pandemia indefectible y que han impactado de manera concreta es una de las metas a las que estamos tratando de trabajar dentro de ese objetivo que decía número 17, relacionada que nos convoca a reasignar y resignificar los planes a través de modelos nuevos más innovadores y para su salud y bienestar, que hoy nos convoca desde la UCI. En abril de 2020 realizamos un encuentro virtual iberoamericano presidido por el alcalde de Madrid junto con todos los alcaldes de Iberoamérica para intercambiar esas experiencias y medidas de mitigación en la lucha contra la pandemia. En mayo de este año hemos realizado el seminario Avanzamos Juntos 2019 para establecer de una manera conjunta las respuestas sanitarias que estábamos dando desde las ciudades iberoamericanas, que las ciudades pudieron compartir sus experiencias en el marco de la pandemia para dar respuesta frente a la emergencia. El intercambio de experiencias y lecciones aprendidas producto de la crisis de la pandemia también nos ha motivado a recopilar la información de nuestras ciudades miembros en una publicación institucional, trabajo y conocimiento. Dado que cada uno de nosotros nos hemos enfrentado a una situación absolutamente nueva, el poder conocer cómo se ha enfrentado cada una de las ciudades nos puede dar de cómo poder dar respuesta a las incertidumbres que nos vamos enfrentando. Por tanto, ese trabajo en común y poner en común todas las mejores prácticas que estamos desarrollando cada uno de nosotros con voluntad y nuestro mejor servicio público, creemos que es la manera de seguir. Con el capítulo de COVID-19, el mayor desafío para nuestras ciudades, este documento recoge los testimonios de los alcaldes y las alcaldesas iberoamericanas sobre los planes estratégicos y futuro para construir entre todos unas ciudades más seguras, resilientes y sostenibles. Además, hoy, en el Día de los Gobiernos Locales y Regionales, enmarcado en este foro político de alto nivel para el desarrollo sostenible, es una oportunidad clave que se nos presenta para intercambiar estas ideas y tomar decisiones y redefinir estrategias que, como decía Emilia, son el momento de pasar a la ejecución, ¿no? De pasar de las ideas, una vez que nos hemos enfrentado a esta situación, a pasar a bajarlos al terreno, ¿no? Y en esta línea resulta esencial que la localización de las ODS sea un compromiso asumido y coordinada para conseguir que ese desarrollo sea verdaderamente sostenible. El informe anual de HLPF sobre la localización de las ODS en el cual la UCI hemos contribuido es un aporte estratégico en ese sentido, a partir del cual confío que vamos a poder recoger las conclusiones, las ideas prioritarias y que nos sirvan, sobre todo, lo más importante, de ruta para saber hacia dónde tenemos que ir y conseguir esa recuperación real, ese desarrollo justo y sostenible que necesitamos. Por tanto, yo confío en que la puesta en común de estas ideas nos sirvan para tener esa hoja de ruta. Y ya concluyo. Muchas gracias a todos por escucharme.
Thank you very much, Almudena. Sorry for trying to keep the time not too long. I will ask also your colleagues from the panel to be concise, because there are a lot of things to do all day. But let's stay in Latin America with Pablo Jurado. Pablo is the president of the Association of Regions and Provinces of Ecuador. and president of the UCLG Forum of Regions, a new, rather new organization in UCLG, bringing together regions from all over the world. So Pablo, the recovery and local public service provision of the SDGs are starting, are moving, are addressing issues. How are the regions involved in that? Where do they stand in the delivery of these actions?
Muchas gracias. Un saludo desde la mitad del mundo. Quiero iniciar expresando mi pésame igualmente a la familia de nuestro compañero alcalde de Johannesburgo, lamentando su fallecimiento. Y como somos globales, no puedo dejar también de expresar mi pésame a la familia del presidente de Haití, Jovenel Moïse, igualmente al pueblo haitiano. Es lamentable que esto esté sucediendo en nuestros días. El informe para el Desarrollo Sostenible 2021 de Naciones Unidas señala que la pandemia está conduciendo a un mundo aún más desigual, que la economía mundial ha experimentado la peor recesión en 90 años, que los segmentos más vulnerables de la sociedad están afectados de manera desproporcionada y que la situación en los países más pobres del mundo es altamente preocupante y podría retrasar el cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible otros 10 años más. En este contexto, se ha puesto de manifiesto la necesidad de transformar las estructuras de gobernanza y las dinámicas territoriales. Cabe destacar que los gobiernos locales y en específico las regiones ocupan una posición estratégica en la territorialización y localización de las agendas globales y representan un actor fundamental para el fortalecimiento de la relación entre las entidades y agendas locales, nacionales e internacionales, hecho fundamental para asegurar una recuperación justa, sostenible, verde, resiliente e igualitaria. Por tal razón, y con la finalidad de visibilizar los avances y desafíos de los gobiernos provinciales del Ecuador en la adopción de la Agenda 2030 para el Desarrollo Sostenible, el Consorcio de Gobiernos Provinciales del Ecuador, CONGOPE, en mi calidad de presidente, al igual que del Foro Mundial de Regiones y en mi calidad de vicepresidente mundial de CGLU, realizamos un levantamiento de un examen voluntario de la implementación de la Agenda 2030. Como antecedente, los 23 gobiernos provinciales en Ecuador impulsamos políticas de desarrollo territorial integral con la misión ulterior de reducir las brechas estructurales y aprovechar las potencialidades. Por tanto, actuaciones que se desprenden de esta visión de desarrollo compaginan directamente con los postulados de la Agenda 2030. Sin embargo, durante los últimos años y especialmente tras la crisis ocasionada por la pandemia 2020, en el 2020, se pone en evidencia la acentuación de los desequilibrios en las provincias y la población, lo cual advierte un escenario no muy prometedor para garantizar el cumplimiento de una visión territorial nacional y global. Entre las principales iniciativas desarrolladas por las provincias en la pandemia fueron la provisión de insumos a la población, pruebas rápidas y PCR, kits de desinfección, mascarillas, entrega de kit de alimentos para la población más vulnerable, implementación de arcos de desinfección en la red de abastecimiento de la producción local, procesos de apoyo a la producción local y campañas de consumo local, fortalecer corredores logísticos para el abastecimiento, proponer al Ejecutivo mecanismos de canje de deuda para comprar vacunas, es decir, nosotros dejábamos de recibir recursos para infraestructura y le propusimos al gobierno nacional que se tome recursos de lo que nos deben para poder comprar vacunas. Esa fue iniciativa del Consorcio de Gobiernos Provinciales del Ecuador. Poner a disposición del Ejecutivo la capacidad operativa de las provincias para la coordinación de las siguientes fases de vacunación. En este momento, varios gobiernos provinciales están ya interviniendo en coordinación con el Ministerio de Salud en el programa de vacunación que en las próximas horas ya se volverá un plan masivo. Ecuador viene sufriendo una crisis en la institucionalidad del Estado, ocasionando repercusiones complejas en el proceso de descentralización, lo cual se refleja en un deterioro de las capacidades de gestión del desarrollo. Los gobiernos provinciales que padecen dependencia y crisis fiscal, duplicación de intervenciones en competencias por parte de entes rectores y una visión centralista del desarrollo. Esto ha repercutido considerablemente al desgaste de los procesos de planificación en el país, tanto en el nivel central como en el territorial y local. Si bien es cierto, la pandemia supone para el mundo y el Ecuador una desviación en el cumplimiento de las metas pactadas al 2030 y de todos los procesos de planificación de largo plazo, tanto en el nivel central como en el nivel territorial y local, con una repercusión directa en la acentuación de brechas en poblaciones con mayores condiciones de vulnerabilidad. Por tanto, es necesario solicitar al sistema de Naciones Unidas una estrategia complementaria que motive a los actores y redimensionar prioridades y canalizar recursos. Esta es la acción y la participación de los gobiernos autónomos descentralizados del Ecuador reunidos en el CONGOPE para dar respuesta a las inquietudes que globalmente están exigiendo cada vez más de las regiones y los gobiernos locales una participación activa. Un abrazo nuevamente, saludos igualmente para Emilia Sánchez y todos quienes están participando en este foro.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pablo Gerardo. Maintenant, on va traverser le sud de l'Atlantique pour aller en Afrique, en Côte d'Ivoire, avec Jean-Marc Yassé, qui est maire de Cocody. Bienvenue, monsieur le maire. Ravi de vous accueillir. Et, monsieur le maire, j'aimerais vous demander quelles initiatives peuvent être mises en place localement pour mobiliser la population autour des objectifs du développement durable et pour faire en sorte que les gens, que la population, que les citoyens prennent en compte ces objectifs du développement durable et les intègrent dans leurs propres activités. Nous vous écoutons pour 5 minutes maximum. Je crois que votre micro n'est pas branché. On ne vous entend pas.
Vous m'entendez maintenant?
Voilà, ça y est, je vous entends. Très bien, parfait.
Bonjour à tous et excusez-moi pour le retard. On m'avait dit 13h, donc je vous ai pris en cours. J'étais allé pour des inaugurations. Ça va. Mais écoutez, nous sommes en train de sensibiliser un peu nos populations ici par rapport d'abord à la pandémie qui nous a tous vraiment touchés, je voudrais dire même déboussolés dans tout ce que nous avons comme organisation mise en place et qui nous a obligés à réadapter et à réactualiser un peu notre mode de fonctionnement. Et surtout, ce que je dis à tout le monde, c'est comment allons-nous préparer l'après-Covid aujourd'hui. Bon, au niveau de notre environnement qui a été quand même assez touché, nous sommes en train de voir comment sensibiliser encore les populations, d'abord, pour les mesures de prévention, pour les déplacements, pour les conditions de restructuration des uns et des autres sur notre mode de fonctionnement, notre façon de travailler et notre façon de pouvoir côtoyer les uns et les autres. Donc, je ne vous cache pas que j'ai pris en cours et je n'ai pas eu le dossier. Je n'ai eu le dossier qu'aujourd'hui parce que j'étais en déplacement. Donc, si vous permettez que je puisse vous envoyer un dossier tranquillement après, lorsque j'aurai bien pris connaissance du dossier, parce que là, je tombe dans la conférence aujourd'hui, ça me ferait plaisir de vous donner les sentiments que j'ai plutôt au niveau de mon conseil et de moi-même. vis-à-vis de notre population.
Bien sûr, pas de souci, monsieur le maire.
Donc, voilà. Donc là, nous étions sur l'organisation, puisque nous n'avons pas pu faire la conférence l'année passée au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire sur Cocody et Abidjan. Donc, nous avons discuté avec les uns et les autres, l'OIDP et la CGLU, pour voir comment nous pouvions réorganiser cette conférence au niveau de l'Afrique, la deuxième conférence au niveau de l'Afrique, mais surtout au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Nous avons tenu au courant nos autorités. Donc, on était en train de voir si vraiment, comment nous allons recevoir les uns et les autres et les différents sujets qui touchent, un, la pandémie, deux, les femmes, trois, notre environnement. Et c'est pourquoi je vous demande, Clémence, pour me permettre de vous envoyer, si j'ai un mail, dans les 24 à 48 heures maximum. Voilà. Mon point de vue, mais plus ou moins les solutions que nous proposons au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire.
Très bien, merci.
Voilà, parce que voilà, j'étais en train de...
Mais peut-être, monsieur le maire, vous pouvez nous dire, vous avez commencé à nous dire comment vous alliez prendre en compte la crise, essayer d'y répondre, la crise du Covid. Et je sais combien l'Afrique est aussi touchée par, et on l'a vu encore avec le décès du maire de Johannesburg. Mais comment, dans votre ville, vous pensez que les habitants et les citoyens, en fait, réagissent par rapport aux objectifs de développement durable, parce que c'est quelque chose de très, très global, dont on discute ici, mais est-ce qu'il y a un impact pour la population? Est-ce que finalement les gens se rendent compte de ce qui se discute dans nos réunions, finalement?
Non, là, quand vous parlez de la pandémie, c'est effectivement, bon, pour la grâce de Dieu, le Seigneur nous a épargné vraiment que beaucoup de personnes soient touchées au niveau d'ici. Lorsque la pandémie a commencé, il y a eu une forte campagne que nous avons mise en place au niveau des mesures barrières, au niveau de la sensibilisation des uns et des autres, au niveau de l'environnement. Je leur ai fait comprendre qu'il fallait que nous ayons un environnement quand même sain. Et je ne vous cache pas que les gens ont été plus ou moins, les 6 premiers mois, ont suivi les consignes. Et au fur et à mesure, voyant que la pandémie, malheureusement ou heureusement, ne nous a pas trop attaqué ici, il y avait, avec le problème des réseaux sociaux, le fait que les gens se disaient, oui, non, ce n'est pas chez nous, ça n'existe pas. Donc, il fallait sensibiliser encore les populations pour leur faire comprendre que c'était réel. Avec l'histoire des vaccins, où certains disaient, oui, non, on vaccine au niveau de l'Europe, ce n'est pas les mêmes vaccins qui arrivent au niveau de l'Afrique. Et je ne vous cache pas que sensibiliser ces populations était de plus en plus difficile pour nous. Moi, par exemple, je vais vous dire que j'ai fait les 2 doses d'AstraZeneca. Par la grâce de Dieu, ça va. J'estime que je peux enlever un peu le masque pour essayer de respirer avec les mesures barrières, mais vous avez quand même un grand nombre encore au niveau de la population qui est réticente et qui se dit non, il y a plus ou moins un complot derrière qui fait que, oui, pourquoi le taux n'est pas élevé à faire le vaccin. Je leur fais comprendre que le vaccin, quand même, c'est à titre préventif et ce qui nous permettra de ne pas faire la cause, du moins le cas grave de Covid. Donc, même à 100%, ça nous évite quand même les cas graves. Donc, il y a toujours les campagnes de sensibilisation.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, monsieur le maire. Je vais maintenant me tourner vers Gunn-Marit Helgesen. Dear Gunn-Marit, we see that there are many activities that are done, but it's also a question of reporting. How do we report on these actions? And we see that more and more local governments are doing voluntary local reviews, and also some national associations are conducting voluntary subnational reviews to explain how the SDGs are implemented at the local and at the subnational level. How can we increase their impact, do you think, in a deeper transformation of our societies?
Thank you so much, Frederic. Dear friends, dear colleagues, I also want to convey my heartfelt condolences to family and friends and to our colleagues, Mayor of Johannesburg. But again, I would like to thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you some reflections and experiences. Let me also congratulate the Global Task Force and UCLG and the teams behind with this impressive report. This report really shows that local and regional authorities all over the world uphold the SDGs also in the constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic. In my mind, the lesson learned the last year, the value of effective multi-level governance has become even more important during this crisis. Municipalities and regions are key partners of national governments for the restoration of the economy, social life, and normal democratic functions at the local and regional level after the pandemic. The new Gold report clearly illustrates that the local and regional governments and their associations have made great efforts to expand SDG localization through voluntary local and subnational reviews, with more than 100 local and 15 subnational reviews during the past 2 years. In Norway, we have taken in 2021 undertaken voluntary reviews of how we are working towards a sustainable future at the national, subnational, and local level. And this has provided a unique opportunity to demonstrate how the Norwegian multi-level governance model delivers on Agenda 2030. The subnational report addresses how Norwegian municipalities and regional authorities work towards the goals and how the sector contributes to achieving them. It provides many good examples from all over the country. It has been an ambition to deliver an honest and transparent report so that we can learn from the shortcomings and take the proper actions. The local reports are excellent case studies on the work in individual municipalities. It provides the municipality a wealth of knowledge on how they are doing, how to succeed, and what it takes to move ahead. Subnational reports aggregate achievements by local and regional authorities. They also reveal inconsistency in policy, the strategic gaps, lack of tools, or incomplete sets of data across tiers of government. Together, they make a powerful instrument for transformation. National reports tend to fall short in understanding and expressing local and regional progress towards the SDGs. So through combining a voluntary national review with a subnational review and several local reviews, as Norway now has done, we can move from knowledge to action and thus foster a deeper transformation. In Norway, we are taking concrete steps to secure action across tiers of government through a political agreement with the government on joint action for SDG implementation. And the SDGs are a shared responsibility, and we know and we will not succeed unless we truly acknowledge the value of a whole of government. So we have now entered the decade of action. We have the knowledge, now we need action. Local and regional governments have demonstrated that they can deliver. To further enhance the needed transformation, they need proper authority and instruments for consultation and finances. And of course, trust and respect from national governments and international institutions. We as local leaders, we know we can do it if we have the power and if we have the tools. So let's empower local and regional governments and we will deliver. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gunn-Marit, and thank you for this report and engagement. Always very welcome. Valérie Dumontet. Alors, Valérie, vous êtes directement en lien avec les citoyens dans votre département, dans l'Aude. Comment est-ce que vous-même et votre collectivité, vous intégrez la décentralisation, la coopération décentralisée dans la politique des SDG? Et je sais que vous êtes aussi engagé avec Cités Unies France, dans les groupes de travail. Donc, comment vous intégrez tout ça dans ce travail sur la coopération décentralisée?
Bonjour à tous. Je voudrais tout d'abord joindre ma voix aux condoléances à la famille du maire de Johannesburg, mais aussi avoir une pensée pour l'ensemble des victimes du Covid-19. À travers tous les témoignages qu'on a entendus depuis le début de ce segment, on a bien entendu que les gouvernements locaux sont sur le front pour gérer les conséquences des grands dérèglements mondiaux. Et la lutte contre la pandémie du Covid-19 en est une triste illustration. On a bien vu à quel point les autorités locales sont un rouage essentiel pour agir dans la proximité, avec et pour la population dans le cadre de la protection sanitaire, mais aussi pour assurer autant que possible le maintien d'une activité économique, sociale, locale. Et donc, pour faire le lien avec les ODD et l'action de coopération décentralisée, les autorités locales sont une échelle essentielle pour localiser les ODD et engager les transformations nécessaires. Et cette localisation des ODD permet une articulation globale locale, permet aussi de guider l'action de proximité, de fixer un cap, de donner un sens aux actions engagées dans la proximité et de positionner en fait un référentiel de gouvernance et d'indicateurs d'impact. Et c'est vrai que l'engagement collectif des différents réseaux dans les forums politiques du haut niveau depuis quelques années a permis de faire progresser la considération et la reconnaissance du rôle des autorités locales dans la localisation des ODD par le niveau international. Au sein des réseaux comme et gouvernements locaux, on voit bien, à travers notamment les rapports qui est aujourd'hui présenté, qui est le 5e rapport présenté, on voit bien comment les gouvernements locaux construisent une action puissante et coordonnée qui leur permet de démontrer l'efficacité des partenariats internationaux pour rechercher des solutions et contribuer à l'atteinte des ODD. Ainsi, on peut démontrer que l'agglomération d'actions micro a un impact macro. Et c'est conscient de ces enjeux qu'Cité Unie France, qui est le réseau que je représente aujourd'hui, qui est une tête de réseau transpartisane, multiniveau, des autorités locales françaises qui sont engagées dans l'action internationale. Et donc, on a fait de l'articulation entre politique locale et coopération décentralisée un cheval de bataille pour atteindre les ODD. Je voudrais juste signaler que quand je dis coopération décentralisée, ce qu'on entend, j'entends les partenariats pair à pair, d'élu à élu, conclus entre autorités locales politiques multiniveaux françaises et étrangères. Je dis ça parce qu'au niveau de l'Union européenne, il y a une autre définition qui englobe aussi les ONG. Là, je parle bien des partenariats entre autorités locales politiques et donc d'élus à élus. Donc, dans cette perspective-là, l'ambition qu'on s'est fixée, c'est de positionner les ODD comme un socle commun qui structure les partenariats peer-to-peer pour le décliner en plan d'action. Ainsi, on positionne que les territoires, où qu'ils se situent, sont tous en développement durable, avec la responsabilité d'agir en s'épaulant réciproquement. Nous avons décidé de nous concentrer sur un travail opérationnel sur comment intégrer la localisation des ODD et l'agenda 2030 dans les partenariats de coopération décentralisés, et ça en lien avec d'autres réflexions menées au sein de réseaux comme CGLU et Plateforma. Et là, je voudrais porter à la connaissance des panélistes et des personnes présentes le processus qui est en cours avec le module de formation 4 de CGLU Plateforma qui vise à former des formateurs sur comment mieux lier la coopération décentralisée à l'agenda 2030 ainsi que ses 17 ODD et vice-versa. Le travail, donc on a engagé un travail, nous, Cité Unie France, soutenu par CGLU et Plateforma, qui est la mise en corrélation entre l'approche théorique de ce module de formation numéro 4 et la mise en pratique opérationnelle dans la proximité sur les territoires des autorités locales qui ont des partenariats internationaux. Ainsi, nous voulons explorer et de façon pragmatique et opérationnelle comment est-ce qu'on peut aller au-delà d'un partage d'expérience ou un partage de formation pour proposer un accompagnement individualisé qui est une des clés de réussite de l'appropriation et de la mise en pratique des ODD. Comment est-ce qu'on identifie les cibles et les indicateurs les plus adaptés pour assurer un renforcement du référentiel ODD dans les coopérations internationales? Comment est-ce qu'on crée des outils qui permettent de positionner les ODD comme référentiel commun, comme un langage commun dans les partenariats de coopération? Et comment est-ce qu'on permet à ces partenariats internationaux d'impulser des dynamiques collectives qui mettent en cohérence les actions multiniveaux, multi-acteurs, publics, privés, citoyens, en se référant aux indicateurs ODD? Et je rappelle à ce titre l'ODD 17 qui pose la mise en œuvre des partenariats efficaces comme une clé de réussite stratégique des ODD. Donc, on a une première étape en cours qui est une expérimentation avec quelques partenariats volontaires. Et sur la base de ces partenariats, on va capitaliser pour créer une sorte de boîte à outils qui peut être transférable à d'autres partenariats de coopération décentralisée et ainsi lier l'approche conceptuelle et théorique avec une boîte à idées opérationnelle, une boîte à outils pragmatique et opérationnelle. Et on va formaliser ce retour d'expérience pour alimenter le rapport annuel de la Global Task Force et donc faire en sorte d'alimenter ces rapports annuels de façon opérationnelle.
Merci, merci Valérie. Merci et merci aussi de montrer qu'il y a aussi un accompagnement et que notre rôle en tant que réseau, c'est d'offrir des outils et des instruments pour les collectivités territoriales, pour les associations nationales, pour s'engager dans cette démarche. Donc, il y a effectivement le module de formation qui a été créé, inventé, mis en place par CGLU et Platforma et qui est tout à fait pertinent avec le soutien de Cités Unies France. Il y a aussi effectivement les voluntary reports que Gunn-Marit a présentés et qui sont des éléments qui accompagnent aussi les collectivités dans ces démarches. C'est très important. Il y en a d'autres. Je pourrais parler du cadre référentiel de la ville durable, RFSC, qui est un outil aussi d'échange et d'accompagnement de mise en place de plans d'action. Et puis, il y a plein d'autres portails. Il y a, je pense, le portail que nos amis allemands ont mis en place, les Italiens également. Donc, beaucoup de choses qui existent. Peut-être qu'il faudrait pouvoir en faire la liste exhaustive. Peut-être, je dis ça à Emilia, pour le partager. Je crois que ça existe, mais que peut-être il faudrait qu'on en fasse un document pour donner à tous les collègues et toutes les villes ces possibilités. So I'm at the end of my monitoring, I think. Emilia, I don't know, I think we have a couple of minutes if there are any questions from the audience. What do you think? Yes, you say yes. So if anyone has a question or wants to comment, you're welcome to do so. I'm trying to see if I see anyone reacting. I don't see anyone, so maybe, Emilia, the best thing to do is to give you back the floor. How is that?
Well, thank you very much, Frederic. Then if there are no comments, I don't see, I don't know whether Lucy or other colleagues, representatives of the Global Task Force would like to make comments at this point. If not, what I propose to do is to go to the next segment where we are going to be discussing with partners, because of course the Local and Regional Governments Day is not only about the perception and the vision of the local government leadership, but it's also very much about the territories, the inhabitants, the citizens, and we cannot do things alone. So we have a very interesting set of partners here that have been working with us towards the development of the Sustainable Development Goals, providing inputs as well, that have been with us also in the development of the new urban agenda. So I propose to get started with that. And I would like to thank you, Frederic and Platforma, for both for the moderation, but also for the inputs that you provide every year to our reporting. I would also like to thank Valérie de Montet, because she was yesterday representing the national government of France. And it's a great pride for us to acknowledge a local elected official that represents, is part of the official delegation and spoke on our behalf and on behalf of the government of France yesterday in the official session of the high-level political forum going local. I wanted to acknowledge, Valérie, this achievement, and I hope that many governments will follow the lead. We also had our co-president and mayor of The Hague, Jan van Zanen, last year in a similar role. And I think it is very, very important that when you have this space, you also refer to the work that we do together.
Indeed,
and I am very, very grateful.
Let me say on this, Emilia, that this is something that we have been asking for years in Europe, that European governments give a seat to local governments representative in national delegations. It has been the case in some countries like the Netherlands, the Scandinavian countries, mostly. So I'm very happy and proud that France, which is a very centralistic country, as you know, opens up its mind to this. And congratulations to Valérie. It's a recommendation also from the European Union that we have been achieving in the last years. So let's hope that in the years to come, all states, not only in Europe, but also in other continents, open their delegations to local governments. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. And that when they do, the local elected officials do what Valérie did yesterday, which is acknowledge our work. Thank you, Valérie, because you mentioned the networks explicitly. And that's what we need. We need national governments to understand that we are not in a competition, that we are part of the solution and that we complement those arrangements. So I think it's good for all of us to realize how relevant this is for the constituency. We are making progress. Progress is tiny, and we can go back, on progress. So but we do need to acknowledge progress when it's there in front of us. Another big progress that we're going to have our colleague Chris Williams, the director of the UN Habitat Office in New York, talking about is the United Nations Task Force for the Future of Cities. That is also something that is really powerful and where the Global Task Force is very, very engaged. But let us now go to our partners, to the representatives of the communities, and to other UN agencies that are very meaningful and critical for the work of our constituency towards the achievement of the SDGs. And allow me to start with Jeannie Birch, President of the General Assembly of Partners. Jeannie Birch is well known to the local and regional governments constituency because she hasn't missed the local and regional government day for quite a while. We like to keep our partners following us, and we have quite interesting plans ahead as well for the General Assembly of Partners in respect to the new urban agenda. So Jeannie, some thoughts on how you see this high-level political forum for the constituencies that are gathered around GAP, and maybe a peek to the future, and all of that in around 3 minutes. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. You're right, the Local and Regional Governments Day is not to be missed any year. It's an absolutely spectacular convening of leadership among local and regional governments who are so important to the implementation of the SDGs and the new urban agenda. You know the data that a high percentage of all the targets have to be done locally. I wanted to discuss the idea of partnership today with regard to the different types, the nature, and how it can best be done and improved. For example, we are all talking about multi-stakeholder partnership. What does this mean? This means, obviously, vertical integration, as we've just heard, multi-level government, national, state, local, and neighborhood representatives to discuss and be engaged in partnership activities. It means agreements among different groups within the non-governmental arrangements. I would call that horizontal partnerships. In particular, by the way, when I talked about the vertical and multi-level government, I also wanted to include within that the UN agencies who fit in to these various levels along the way, and have a terrific amount of information and data to share with the local citizens. I also would remind everybody that local citizens in democratic countries vote. And so it's really important to think about how we can have productive dialogues to represent the views of everybody, but at the same time, provide for a wholesome, comprehensive understanding of larger issues within the discussions that might be had. And this means, particularly at the horizontal level, when we're non-governmental agencies or entities are working with local and regional governments, it means that there's discussion and dialogue among them. The nature of partnerships is really very critical. We need to think about how to listen to each other. Different groups have different motivations, and we need to understand those motivations. And particularly when we're talking about the implementation of a global agenda, whether it be the SDGs, the New Urban Agenda, the climate change agenda, there are motivations at different levels that needs to be recognized, need to be discussed among the partners so that they understand where they're coming from and where they're going and what they can do together. And this means taking partnership to a level where dialogue happens. People listen to each other. They understand each other's groups, listen to each other. They understand the group's motivations. They work towards a consensus around particular topics. This is not easy because the motivations for some groups are very, very strong, and it's hard for them to give up their particular motivations in order to understand and accommodate the motivations of others. I'd also like to talk about the importance of partnerships horizontally among civil society groups. The General Assembly of Partners, I think, is a terrific example of that. It is 17 partner constituent groups representing local and regional governments, parliamentarians, research and science, the scientific inquiry, women, indigenous peoples, the 9 major groups, as you know, and several other groups that are self-identified and self-governed in terms of what they see is their role within the implementation of the New Urban Agenda at every level. And so among the horizontal partnerships, we also need to see cooperation among the civil society groups as well. The trade unions and labor group has to discuss the business and industry and see where they can come together to discuss what's needed, again, with local and regional governments. I'd like to talk about also sort of the nature of partnerships. We have spoken dialogue, such as we have today, where we talk to each other and we listen to each other and so on and so forth. We have written pieces as well. And in the written pieces, there is data that is collected. And the question is whose data and what kind of data is used to support the partnership agreements that we will arrive at. We need to think about formally collected data, the quantitative data that census might be collect, or you might collect at your local level pertaining to the public services that you give. But also we need to think about qualitative data and how that can be integrated into the dialogue as we go forward and talk about how to agree. And lastly, I'd like to talk about the difference between formal and informal partnerships and access to each other in informal and formal ways. Formal, obviously, is public hearings, getting to testify about things and having access to at least express one's views in terms of an entity, but also the informal dialogues that occur need to happen through convenings. I'm sorry we're on Zoom and not person to person, because it's the informal dialogues that often are breakthroughs through strengthening those partnerships. So we need to create environments where we can have vertical and horizontal partnerships, where we can partnerships among groups, civil society groups, as well as governmental groups. We need to have dialogue that's formal and informal, and we need to recognize the different kinds of data on which these partnerships are built. So I think I've expended my 3 minutes. If not, I could go on, but I think I'll yield the floor to the next speaker.
Yes, It was more than 3, and that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. It's always there is a clock there for your reference for the following speakers. But I mean, it's very important to hear these messages, and it is worth mentioning also that there are important efforts being made to ensure that there are policy recommendations that we develop together. And I attach great importance to that. From the perspective of the Global Task Force, certainly many of the recommendations that we put through during the Habitat 3 process to the negotiators were things that we discussed previously with groups like the General Assembly of Partners. We have delivered a statement to the Habitat CPR's meeting, which we also shared with you. But most importantly, for my own organization, for instance, and I wanted to share this with the rest of the Global Task Force, the General Assembly of Partners produced policy recommendations about sustainability and implementation of the new urban agenda, which are part of our political guidelines and recommendations within a town hall process. So I think this is the kind of matured relationships and next generation alliances that we're trying to trigger. And I am going to give the floor now to Thomas George, Global Lead Urban Programming of UNICEF. The issue of children and youth in the current context, but also intergenerational responsibilities is becoming very, very strong in the agenda of local and regional governments, a different type of partnerships, of course, because it is a UN agency, but it's still very relevant to our constituency. Thomas, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emilia. Greetings to all from UNICEF. As you all know, UNICEF is the UN agency for children, and we recognize the critical role of local and regional governments in the survival, development, and safety of children, because you are the governments which are closest to the children on the ground. And it was amply demonstrated when city governments were at the forefront of the COVID response, when in 2020, more than 90% of the COVID cases were reported from urban areas. The local governments are also key to service delivery, and it's vital to support investment and capacities at subnational level for an equitable, inclusive, and sustainable recovery from what the world is experiencing now. Particularly so when it comes to the rights of 350 million children living in slums and informal settlements. In the cities of developing countries, 30 to 70% of the urban children live in slums and informal settlements. And I think in any discourse on urban or local governments, we need to focus on these slums and informal settlements, which is growing by the day. UNICEF has interventions in about 157 countries, and in 90 of them, we have interventions in the urban areas. And in half of those countries, we are also supporting the local and regional governments directly. So that's a huge part of UNICEF work, where we support the local governments and regional governments in their planning, budgeting, and financing, and including the monitoring the situation of children. Based on an evaluation last year, we are stepping up our urban programming with a particular focus on slums and informal settlements, because we found that we were not adequately factoring that into our programming. There will be 5 programming areas or key areas, starting with data and evidence, addressing equity gaps in social services, looking at urban environment going beyond water and sanitation to looking at pollutants in cities. Urban resilience, which includes spatial planning, disaster risk reduction, and climate action, and urban governance, which is a crucial area of work where we look at coordination, which is both vertical and horizontal coordination between the different actors at the local level, but also coordination between the different levels of government and with the private sector, etc. Capacity building, planning, budgeting, financing, and participation. Here, I would like to highlight the 3 areas now for today's discussion. One is on data. City averages mask the inequities in cities, and it's very important that we have disaggregated intra-urban data to find the pockets of deprivation in cities. I think that is an area which has been highlighted by many cities, even the developed cities, and this is one area where we need to really work on. The second area is on participation. How can we institutionalize systems and structures for participation of children, young people, and poor communities in the governance? The third one is on financing. Financing, a quarter of the world's development budget is spent by local governments, but still that area is yet to be really developed. How can we ensure that city governments and local governments are financed well? Having said that, I would like to come to how UNICEF works with UCLG. We have been working together with UCLG for the past couple of years, mostly on the issues of migrant children and on public financing. Recently, we had a webinar with UCLG on the issues of public financing for children for local governments. Going forward, we want to strengthen, we are planning, or we are working on strengthening this partnership, taking it to the next level, where we will work with UCLG to sharpen the engagement of UCLG with local governments and regional governments on developing the agenda for children and youth. And the areas we would like to focus there is, again, as I said earlier, building capacities of the local governments for disaggregated intra-urban data, planning, budgeting, financing, and participation of children and knowledge management. With this, I would like to hand over the mic back to Emilia, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And the idea is that this work prioritizing the children agenda is something that we escalate up to the global task force. And that's the very reason that you are here with us today as part of the local and regional governments day. I think it will be unavoidable for us to see how we can embed this in the general work that the Global Task Force is doing. UNICEF is also part of that UN task force on the future of cities. And hopefully at the end of this round, I would like to have also some feedback from Lucy and Lucy Slacks, the Secretary General of CLGF, and other colleagues within the Global Task Force about how we see the possibilities to engage on this agenda and bringing it to the forefront of the work that we do. I have been told that the mayor of Genk, Wim Dries, needs to leave very, very soon. So we're going to hold on partners and go to one of our own. Mayor, we wouldn't have it that you have to leave without intervening. So we are moving you up to this segment. Thank you, as always, for joining us. You used to be with us in New York, in the delegation. We have a very big delegation this year, over 70 elected officials, over 200 delegates, but virtual. So thank you for being with us once again in the High Level Political Forum, and the floor is yours, Mayor Dries.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Indeed, it's great again to see everybody, and dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, allow me to picture our context. As a president of the Association of Flemish Local Governments, the VVSG, and also as mayor of the city of Genk, I can say that the 300 Flemish cities and municipalities have fully embraced the Agenda 2030. We calculated that 2 out of 3 Flemish local governments have integrated the Agenda 2030 in one way or another in their municipal policy plans. Now I would like to bring 4 points to your attention, and they all focus on the principle of partnership from the perspective of cities and municipalities. In my view, there are in fact 4 levels of partnership, and I believe they are equally important when it comes to accelerating the implementation of the Agenda 2030. I will enumerate them briefly to contribute to this discussion. First, the SDGs form the framework for existence and for new partnerships between local governments in Europe and around the world. Partnerships around the world. Decentralized development cooperation is key to accelerate the SDGs. In Flanders, we have long-standing traditions of city-to-city cooperation. These city-to-city cooperation contribute to the delivery of the SDGs through strengthening sectoral policies on water, waste management, local economic development, etc. All this happens through a peer-to-peer and or colleague-to-colleague approach. On top of these long-term cooperation partnerships, we want to develop next year a guiding instrument for shorter term in which 2 local governments, one in Flanders and one in the Global South, partner up around one SDG, implement specific actions on that SDG and report on the progress to each other. We believe that these short-term partnerships could serve as a starting point for longer city-to-city cooperation. Secondly, within Europe, Flanders has more than 400 town twinning agreements, the so-called jumelages, between European associations for youth, sport, culture, between different European governments. We believe that the SDGs can be the guiding principle of a new vision on town twinning, same as the SDG partnerships I mentioned before, but then between European peers. Secondly, SDGs are the framework for a renewed or enhanced partnership with the other spheres of government. Together with the Flemish regional government, we have been involved as a test case in the OECD program, a territorial approach to the SDGs. And this way was a good and inspiring collaboration. We now want to take that a step further. We can take, for instance, the opportunities provided by the SDGs reporting and working together with the central level to include a more comprehensive territorial overview of what is happening across a country. In this respect, I hope that we can embark upon a review mechanism, a VSR, a voluntary subnational review to accelerate the SDG data collection. Thirdly, SDGs are an instrument to partner up and interact with citizens. Local governments are the sphere of government that operates close to the citizens, so accelerating the SDGs also means encouraging our citizens to accelerate. And these citizens translate to sometimes broad SDGs into more concrete actions. In order to interact with the citizens, we have developed a campaign, the Week of the Sustainable Municipality, in which Flemish municipalities identify local heroes in their territory that give the global goals a concrete face. This year, in 2021, more than 111 municipalities will be participating in the campaign, highlighting their local heroes for the Agenda 2030. As monitoring reports show that in Belgium, we are lagging behind on the planet and energy goals, we are focused this year specific on the pillar planet. And last but not least, SDGs, ladies and gentlemen, offer an ideal and common language for partnership with other stakeholders. The SDGs provide a common language for both private and public actors. As umbrella organization for local governments, we have embraced a partnership with both a private consultancy firm, Idea Consult, and a Unitar office in Flanders to start an SDG pioneer program for local governments. This public-private partnership is a new way to provide more in-depth support to our members, the local governments, so that we can help them to accelerate their SDG action plans. Ladies and gentlemen, partnership is the way to go, and I hope that the 4 elements that I brought to this discussion will help the discussion and also will be inspiring for others as we are inspired by others and other examples. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dries. I never forget some of the very interesting ideas. Some of them you have shared with us today that you shared in first person with the United Nations Secretary General during one of our visits. Very, very pioneering and very innovative ways of involving the citizens that show both the commitment from the local governments that you represent to achieve the goals, but also how important you find it to co-create with the communities. And I hope that your words on partnerships can also inspire those that we have here around the table today. Thank you, Mayor Dries, and good luck with dealing with everything that you need to deal with locally. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going back to the partners. I'm sure you found Mayor Dree's inputs as inspiring as we all do at the local and regional governments constituency. I'm going now to Hannes Lagdelius. He is also part of the General Assembly of Partners, co-chair of the Persons with Disabilities constituency, and program officer for inclusive and accessible urban development of the World Blind Union. And with Hannes, we have shared a lot of tables and strategized about many messages. I am really pleased to have you with us once again, Hannes, and I look forward to the work that we might have ahead of us to develop together as Global Task Force. Welcome, Hannes.
Thank you so much, Emilia. Yeah, as mentioned, my name is Hannes Lagdelius from the World Blind Union. The World Blind Union is the global voice for...
Your sound is really low. Can you have a way to maybe speak up?
Is it better now?
It's perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Emilia. My name is, as mentioned, Hannes Lagdelius. I represent the World Blind Union. The World Blind Union is the global voice for the estimated 253 million persons who are blind and partially sighted globally. And we are constituency based upon more than 250 organizations in 190 countries. By 2050, we will be much more people living in urban settlements, and around 2 billion persons with disabilities and older persons will live in cities. And as earlier mentioned today, over 90% of COVID cases occurred in cities, where persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups were hit the hardest by the pandemic. The pandemic and varying responses to it has made persisting structural inequalities shown in new light. It has really exacerbated existing discrimination patterns and accessibility barriers, hindering access to work, education, health, and the right to live independently. For instance, where information and communication systems are not accessible to a diverse population of persons with disabilities, this has also put many at risk during these difficult times. It has become increasingly clear that the multitude of stakeholders at all levels have not done enough to address and remove accessibility barriers. And Building Back Better, briefly, provides a golden opportunity to learn from the past, the present, and also do things right. And this will mean building back better together, of course. More than ever, meaningful dialogue and authentic partnerships between civil society, including organizations of persons with disabilities, and local and regional governments will be determinant if we succeed in creating more inclusive and accessible communities that put people first and celebrates diversity. And it's highlighted in the report presented earlier, like 1 hour ago. It says that it really highlights a key point, that involving vulnerable groups in governance is critical, and in particular, older persons and persons with disability, in order for us to design territories that work for all people. And on accessibility, I like to point out that accessibility is a human right and a precondition for inclusion, as outlined in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is truly an enabler to realize enjoyment of all different rights, and it can never be a standalone thing. If our spaces and services are made accessible, it will not only benefit the diversity of persons with disabilities, but everyone. It is truly a collective good. Accessibility, moreover, is cutting across everything that we do, everything from resilience, mobility, transportation, climate action, and safety. If resilience measures do not account for access requirements of a diversity of the population, how resilient we would truly be when it matters. Partnerships and authentic collaborative efforts between stakeholders, key stakeholders like local and regional governments and organizations of persons with disabilities from all different levels holds the key to tackle challenges of today and the challenges of tomorrow. It will enable us to design with, not for, a specific population, enabling residents and relevant stakeholders to be part of planning and design journeys will allow us to ensure that requirements are met, allowing people to be experts in their own right and increase ownership of how our communities are developed. For instance, this could include supporting policymaking and reviews. I recall the process where the World Blind Union, as part of the partner constituency group of persons with disabilities, also supported UCLD to co-develop the policy paper on inclusive and accessible cities discussed and adopted at the Congress in 2019. But also design of innovative solutions and support implementation and monitoring reviews, not least of accessibility standards by accessibility audits in the local context. The World Blind Union, moreover, wished to commend the great journey of UCLD, following your commitments to engage all persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups to work together with the global movement of local and regional governments to put people first towards realizing the promise of leaving no one behind in also localization efforts. World Blind Union, as part of the Global Network for Disability Inclusive and Accessible Urban Development and the PCD earlier mentioned, contributed to this development of the policy paper in 2019. We are very much amazed by UCLD's accelerating journey since then in putting recommendations into practice, including championing peer-to-peer learning and exchange of practices within the constituency through the establishment of a community of practice, because we learn together and we make positive change happen together. We are very much excited to have had a role in contributing to a journey in different ways ever since we started to interact. And we applaud the commitment toward putting increased focus on universal accessibility as a collective good and cross-cutting in all dimensions of localization efforts and sustainable urbanization. Here, UCLD's continuous leadership will be absolutely paramount for success. You can always count on the World Blind Union and our constituency of organizations of blind and partially sighted and the global disability rights movement as supporters and allies standing ready to collaborate with UCLD and the Global Task Force and the constituency of local and regional governments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannes. Thank you very much. It's a long journey and we are learning a lot, and it's a tough one as well, that you know better than anyone. There are many members of UCLG that are very keen to implement accessibility policies, but it's not an easy task, and that's also why we feel we need to bring it to the broader constituency to make sure that we scale it up, and that is part and parcel of all our recommendations towards the future. So allow me now to go to Lorena Zarate from the Global Platform for the Right to the City. Lorena has been working also with the Global Task Force as we worked towards Habitat 3. We have seen many things happen, Lorena, many good things, I feel. We managed to have reference to the right to the city in the outcome document in Quito, but we have also seen the notion of human rights and right to the city flourish in other discussions, also within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. So Lorena, the floor is yours to see how you see this partnership with our constituency going forward.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you to UCLD and the Global Task Force for the invitation to participate at this very important dialogue. As you know, the Global Platform for the Right to the City was conceived as a multi-sectorial and action-oriented political space to create cities and territories in which every person and all communities can live with dignity and in peace. In the context of still clearly unfolding health and socioeconomic work-life crisis that run in parallel with an ecological emergency, I think we are convinced that the strategies and proposals that brought us together several years ago are more relevant and pertinent than ever. and that the principles and commitments of the international agendas should guide the path forward. We are certain that the people and the planet need not only a recovery, but a radical transformation. As many previous speakers are already referred to this very transformative moment. And we would say that that radical transformation, the pandemic has shown us that is not only urgent, but possible, if based on common visions and relying, most importantly, on coordinated efforts. We, civil society organizations and local and regional governments networks, we know all too well what is at stake and the value of our joint actions. We know that it's necessary and possible to implement an integral territorial and human rights approach. And as you mentioned, the process leading to the Habitat 3 conference and the definition of the new urban agenda in 2016 was a fundamental milestone in complementing and localizing the SDGs. And we're ready to learn from it and build on it, in particular now in the context of Quito +5 process. So because in that process, we realized several things, and among those that the need and the potential of bringing our voices together and creating shared narratives, also the potential of claiming our seats and a prominent role in defining the global agendas, as well as the necessary linkages of those agendas with local policies and local realities. And very importantly, the fact that the right to the city will be impossible without the rights of the cities as autonomous and networked political entities that are based on human rights, participation, and care. At the same time, we are also aware that many fundamental issues were not included in the final version of that urban agenda, and also the new ones have emerged since then. And it's exactly on those that we are focusing our energies. So among many other advocacy, research, and capacity building initiatives that we share, since last year, we have been working on the collective production of policy papers, policy recommendations around 7 key topics, and I will just mention them quickly. 3 of them are ready, and 1 already published, and 2 more about to be published, and we're working on 4 more. And those are touching upon basically the impact of COVID-19 on the right to the city and how to build back more just, caring, and democratic cities for all. Second one on the relevance of the right to the city to face the climate crisis and tackle environmental injustices. The third one on the meaning and dimensions of the cities as common goods, a fundamental topic that, as you know, was left out of the new urban agenda. And 4 more in production, how to create cities and regions without discrimination, with inclusive citizenship, with strengthened public spaces, and very importantly, with more balanced and inclusive urban-rural linkages. So the moment has come, as many speakers already mentioned, to reconsider the role of the public sector, horizontal collaboration, and public community partnerships in creating cities and territories for all. So we look forward to continue working together for the radical transformation that people and the planet so urgently need. Thank you very much for this opportunity and looking forward to that.
Thank you very much, Lorena. And I want to acknowledge a conversation that we had a couple of years ago when we were discussing the positive outcomes of the new urban agenda of the Habitat 3. But also some of the negative things that we had not managed to get into that, that didn't make it through the negotiation. A lot of thinking that you described then very much as the legacy of our joint legacy of Habitat 3, because we had gone through this process of co-creation as local governments, as organized civil society. And I think that we are still building on that legacy pretty much. And that during this pandemic, we have managed to very much put some of our joint agenda issues back at the top of the discussion. I really like also your reference to the common good notion, to the city as common good, which is something that I hear more and more from our membership. So hopefully something that we can build on as we work towards the new common agenda that we will visit in a minute, but also towards the monitoring and revision of the Habitat 3 outcomes next year in April. So thank you for this, and I'm going now to a topic that is rather new, not on the agenda of local governments, but on the agenda of the organized constituency of local governments, of the agenda of the Global Task Force, is the issue of human mobility, migration. We only put it on the agenda, on the joint agenda, a couple of years ago. It is not an easy topic to cover, many different experiences in different parts of the world, but we are certainly building a joint narrative. It's gaining momentum, and it has even found a very strong paragraph in our statement for this year high-level political forum. And this is why I'm delighted to have with us Julian, and I am terrible with names, and I don't dare reading your last name. You will, Julian, tell us how that sounds. He's Senior Policy Specialist of Multilateral Processes Division and Department of International Cooperation and Partnership of the International Organization for Migration, which is one of the partners of the mayoral migration mechanism that we are part of. As I was saying, we managed, Julian, this year to put a very strong paragraph in our statement. We're really happy about this. We also have a couple of important side events that have been organized by members of the Global Task Force. There is one this evening, and there was one a couple of days ago with the Global Parliament of Mayors and the MMC, the Mayors Migration Council organized. How do you see our partnership evolving? And thank you for being with us and representing such an important partners. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Can you hear me? Very well. Thank you for having me in this really interesting side event on the occasion of the HLPF. It's a pleasure to be here. Also on behalf of IOM colleagues working with you in various formats. I'm also here at IOM Focal Point for the UN Network on Migration, and therefore would like to span a bit the link. You describe partnerships as a key component of your work, and for sure within the UN Network on Migration, you have partners to work on the achievement of the Agenda 2030 when it comes to mobility, especially since this year SDG 10.7 is up for review. I looked at the report you presented, and I have here also your recommendation when it comes to migration, which would fully agree it's a very strong statement that is dear to the heart of many of us in the network and at IOM. So many thanks for that. Let me just in the short time I have give you some ideas of how we approach this work, how we link the Agenda 2030 to the implementation of the GCM. As you know, the GCM is rooted in the Agenda 2030, among others, and the local dimension is key. Member states at the time made sure that local actors are being included in the resolution as such, and you probably all know this. I remember well when the city of New York spoke at the adoption of the GCM. At the time, very well received, and a strong statement at the time. I remember that well. I did a quick check just because it's interesting to look at the documents. The notion local in the GCM resolution comes up 41 times, which gives you a rough idea. And then, of course, you know probably the respective paragraphs of the resolution, the whole of government and whole of society approach, the important role when it comes to the local level plays on implementation, but also on review and follow-up. And on that particular review and follow-up, there's a strong link this year at the HLPF, and the UN Network on Migration has put this on its agenda. The voluntary national reviews of states, you have mentioned those that are up, and many countries will present them. Then there are the local voluntary reviews that have been mentioned already, that complement the national ones. So we have a wealth of reports and data. Previous speakers talked about the importance of data, and we can build on. And that's 1 year ahead of the International Migration Review Forum. That you, if you recall, that is the every 4 years, and it's a GA event that will take place early 2022, maybe in May 2022. That's a decision by the President of the General Assembly. So there again, delegations of member state delegations, examples have been mentioned, comprise also local governments, which is important. The IMRF modalities resolution furthermore then looks at and specifically mentions the mayor's mechanism inter alia, but also requests the UN network in preparation for the IMRF to collect all inputs received from local, national, regional, and global levels. So the voices of the local level are being heard and are being incorporated, and that is at the heart of the work of the UN Network on Migration. Looking a bit more into detail, I have a few more seconds, I see, how local actors play a role in GCM implementation. That is something we in the network look into. Local actors have a role to play. There are guidances developed on GCM implementation for two groups, the UN country teams, but also national governments and other government actors. These have been drawn up in the co-working groups of the National Network on Migration, including local actors. So that is very important. It has been mentioned probably about the call to action we jointly did. That is IOM, the UCLG, and others, has at its heart also the link between sustainable development and the links to the GCM. And it is when it's launched, it will support our call to states and the multilateral scene in the recognition of the important role of cities in migration governance. With that, maybe I give it back to you, Emilia, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, for also recalling this call to action where the Mayors for Migration Council, part of the Global Task Force, is also actively involved, and for recalling some of the achievements that we have had in one of our last meetings with the United Nations Task Force on the Future of Cities. Some of these mechanisms and the way that we were working were also described and put forward as one of the possible examples to enhance the relationship with the constituency. So thank you for those inputs. I'm going now to Andy Deacon, the acting managing director of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Andy, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours on your vision on the type of partnerships that we can pull together.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and good day, colleagues. And as with many others, our condolences on behalf of the GCOM network on the passing of Mayor Makubo. I'm delighted to be able to join you today, in part to talk about some new activity, and as others have, identify some opportunities for new areas of partnership, and I'll focus on just a couple of those. The first one of which is to note that with COP26 looming large on the horizon, we've been actively engaging alongside UCLG and other city network partners to work on the race to resilience and the race to zero. And there are specific city components of both of those programs trying to both drive and support action by municipalities of all stages of preparation in their climate action journey and in all locations around the world to pledge for greater climate action. And as we've seen in the past weeks, whether it's heat waves, in Canada and the northwest of the US, mudslides in Japan and elsewhere in Southeast Asia and elsewhere in the globe, then our town, cities and municipalities are really in the immediate face of climate-related hazard, risk, and very real and apparent danger. And so work with UCLG and others on Race to Resilience and Race to Zero is helping communities to thrive in spite of the many challenges that climate change will bring. So I'd encourage everybody to take a look at those. The Cities Race to Resilience launched just yesterday as part of UNFCCC Asia Pacific Climate Week. And we were very pleased as a network as part of that to welcome a new member, Mayor Abigail Binay from Makati in the Philippines, to the mayoral board of the Global Covenant of Mayors, and wish her well. Look forward to working with her along with the other members of our mayoral board in the coming months, both to support the races, to prepare for COP, and to drive activity forward. So that's one element. The second thing I wanted to mention is that then the Global Covenant has also been looking into and beginning work to integrate greater work on energy access and energy poverty into the work that we're driving across the globe as an alliance. And so through work by our technical experts, through the GCOM Data Technical Working Group, then a new energy access and energy poverty pillar is being integrated into GCOM reporting. And that's very clearly tied to several sustainable development goals, including work on affordable and clean energy, on sustainable cities and communities, and of course on climate action. And the energy access and poverty pillar will become a third pillar of GCOM activity across the board, and will be integrated into our common reporting format, which is the globally harmonized reporting standard for city climate action. So alongside reporting emissions reduction and climate mitigation work, climate adaptation and resilience building, then increasingly recognizing that there are huge inequities in terms of access to energy and the state of energy poverty in countries and cities around the world. And the idea is to integrate this now, but to activate this new pillar of our activity in time for the 2022 reporting cycle. And that will allow 10,000 cities and more to report on their efforts in this area and to really improve our understanding, and then draw in the support, technical assistance and funding that we need to plug the gaps and to narrow some of the equity gaps that are there, in particular on energy access and energy poverty issues. So we look forward to working with all of you in that endeavor, but it will bring a new element to the work of the Global Covenant, to our partnership with UCLG, and we look forward to working with all of you, with UN agencies and others, to advance that work, to highlight what we're achieving, and the important role that local government plays, both on energy, climate and resilience. Thank you, Emilia, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. And I just want to recall that our colleagues from C40 and ICLEI are very active members, and so is CMR as well in GCOM, in the work that we are developing together. As you can see, we have gone through our partners through many of the priorities of our agenda, a very diverse group, which really summarizes what our constituency is focusing on. I have just proposed to Lucy that she will intervene at the end of the session also to provide feedback on how we are looking at these priorities as global task force. So what I propose to do now is to go to Chris Williams, and who is going to present to us this work that the United Nations Task Force on the Future of Cities is doing, and how that is going to contribute to the common agenda. You know, the UN Habitat is co-chairing this task force, so they have very good insights on how the UN is looking into this. He has been our counterpart also in the discussions that we have held with the Global Task Force. There is one more meeting coming up on the 28th of July, if I remember well, Chris, which we have informed the members of the Global Task Force about. What I propose is to start with you, just to give us a kind of a chapeau, so that our political representatives in the next segment, which is going to be facilitated by my colleague, the Secretary General of United Cities and Local Governments Africa, can react to that and provide also inputs to our vision on the common agenda. So Chris, Director of UN Habitat New York office, for those of you that are not familiar with him, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emilia, and thanks distinguished mayors and colleagues that are on the call and various partners and partner networks. Thanks for convening this local and regional governments day and these events that are held on the occasion of the day, including this one. The UN Task Force on the Future of Cities was established by the Secretary General in July of last year, when he held monthly senior management meetings with the entire UN leadership, and decided to table one meeting to the future of cities, and generated a discussion across the leadership of the UN system. And it was agreed to establish a task force on the future of cities with the responsibility of identifying ways to elevate local and regional government engagement in intergovernmental processes, as well as national planning processes. In other words, to look at the multilateral system and think more systematically about the institutional mechanisms that would allow for greater voice and agency of local and regional governments in intergovernmental processes. The first deliverable of that group, it's envisioned to be about a year and a half in duration. And the first deliverable was an input to the report of the Secretary General on our common agenda. In the last General Assembly, the 75th anniversary of the UN, member states requested the Secretary General to develop his vision of where he thought multilateralism should go in the next 25 years until we reach the 100th anniversary of the UN system, and to think more about how multilateralism could be more relevant, more vibrant, more engaged, and more sustainable itself, and more effective in terms of influencing collective action globally. And he has been in the process of doing that by reaching out to member states, various constituencies, different parts of the UN system. And there are many work streams in the preparation for that document. One that he thought was important was to get a sense of what the interagency thinking was on cities and local governments, given that this UN task force was established. So that first deliverable was presented last month, and there was a decision on the part of the special advisor to the Secretary General, as well as the Maimouna Sharif, the executive director of UN Habitat, to extend the participation in the UN task force on the future of cities to include the global task force on local and regional governments. So rather than kind of come up with some report to the Secretary General and then have feedback from the local governments, there was a decision to engage the Global Task Force on Local and Regional Governments at the very early stage, even before there was drafting, to brainstorm about what would be the elements. And I would like to, on this call, recognize Amelia and her leadership in this effort to really act on in a quick manner to mobilize various constituencies within associations and city networks to try to provide some input to that process, which was very well received by the UN system and helped shape the thinking and form of that. I could elaborate at great length about this input, but just to say the kinds of thinking were directed at how can local and regional governments be recognized as local state actors, distinct from non-governmental organizations and various other stakeholders, as really a dedicated local state actor with observer status in both the General Assembly and in ECOSOC. It's a whole process, but the fact that this report recommended that to the Secretary General is a good sign. The second was to think through how the Secretary General himself could potentially establish an advisory committee on local and regional governments that would help to harmonize and better organize the kinds of engagements that he has with various city networks and associations of local and regional governments. It's quite crowded. He works on an ad hoc basis. How can we try to rationalize that and support it with, of course, the support of other parts of the UN system to assist the Secretary General. The next level was to look at subsidiary bodies of the General Assembly. The UN Habitat Assembly is the only part of the UN system, the only subsidiary governing body of the General Assembly, which gives local governments dedicated observer status. Recently, Amelia delivered an address to the Committee of Permanent Representatives, the meeting that was held, their intercessional midterm review that took place last week, as an example. Other subsidiary bodies do not permit that kind of autonomous observer status. So how can we get, for example, the World Health Assembly? Cities were the epicenter of the pandemic. They were the key to the response. How can we work with our colleagues and member states in the World Health Assembly to create a similar kind of space for associations of local and regional governments? UNEA, United Nations Environment Assembly, has made significant moves in this direction by holding forums, city forums on the occasion of the UNEA meetings, but not yet integrated within the deliberations of the core member state engagement. How can we push that envelope? So this is the thinking. And then the last level is very much on the line, and I'm happy that Thomas George was on the call earlier. How can individual UN entities begin, and their governing bodies begin to integrate local and regional governments and urban planning and urban strategic engagement into their strategic plans. Clearly, UNICEF has taken that step in the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan. So it's no longer just a habitat exercise, which is very much what the Secretary General would like to see, a whole of system approach. Our colleagues with IOM, others from the Office of High Commissioner of Human Rights, HCR has done some very creative work on engaging with local and regional governments, et cetera. How do we get a much more comprehensive engagement with local governments? And lastly, and I'll end here, we are gearing up for the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the implementation of the New Urban Agenda, which will take place, and the date is now established, the 28th of April, 2022. That will be a Thursday, last week of April 2022. And this meeting, I think, is important because it's a way to complement this, what I've just been describing in terms of the interagency within the UN system and getting the member states themselves to revisit Quito and look at what has been achieved and hasn't been achieved, take stock of the pandemic and its impact on urban form, urban planning, et cetera, local economy, issues of the role of the state, particularly local state entities, and of course,
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I think it has been really useful for both our partners in this Habitat road map and for our constituency to hear your very clear overview of what is happening. I also wanted to share with you that the Global Task Force, as you know, convenes the World Assembly of Local and Regional Governments, so the political leadership of all of the networks that is acknowledged in the outcome document of Quito. So it is this group of networks that convenes that World Assembly, and we had a preparatory meeting already 2 days ago to see how we around which topics and what would be the priorities for us to convene that World Assembly. It is self-organized. I am sure we will be able to find some kind of overlap between this self-organized event of local and regional governments and what you are describing as that moment within the context of the high level meeting in April next year. We are very committed to make sure that the voices of local governments are heard, but also to call for more reports to be there and for local and regional governments to also contribute to the platform that has been opened by UN Habitat for the reporting and where we have been already participating. And that was also presented to us a couple of days ago as we started the high-level political forum. With these colleagues, I would propose to give the floor now to Jean-Pierre Mbassi, Secretary General of UCLG Africa, for the facilitation of the next segment. I will need to leave you in half an hour or so because we have another event lined up. But Lucy Slacks, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, is going to be closing the meeting. And please, Lucy, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate also ensuring that partners might be able to come back with some thoughts at the end of this. So I'm just mindful of the time of the elected representatives, and so trying to respect that as much as possible. Jean-Pierre, merci d'être là. Bienvenue. À toi la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Emilia, pour cette intéressante réunion. Mais je dois vous dire que je suis triste parce qu'une fois de plus, la pandémie COVID-19 vient de nous frapper en plein cœur en retirant à notre affection Geoffroy Makubo, le maire de Johannesburg. C'était un ami, c'était un camarade, c'était un collègue et il était très engagé dans les affaires et la cause des collectivités territoriales. Et nous nous inclinons devant sa mémoire et nous adressons à sa famille, aux membres du conseil municipal de Johannesburg, à Salga et à l'Afrique du Sud, dont il était un digne fils. Nos sincères condoléances. Je voudrais dire que cette crise sanitaire de la COVID nous a donné un certain nombre de leçons qui sont autant de remises en cause. Et parler de perspectives d'avenir vers l'agenda local commun doit partir des leçons que la COVID vient de nous donner. La première leçon, c'est que sans l'action décisive et l'engagement de l'État, aucune réponse efficace à une crise sanitaire comme celle qu'on vient de vivre, ou qu'on est en train de vivre, ou à toute crise qui met en péril la sécurité collective n'est possible. Ça, c'est une rupture par rapport à la mode antérieure qui disait moins d'État, mieux d'État. Deuxième rupture, sans action de proximité, coordonnée par les autorités territoriales, les mesures prises pour faire face à cette crise n'auraient pas pu avoir l'efficacité voulue. Et ceci confirme une fois de plus la justesse du choix des collectivités territoriales comme le lieu stratégique où se joue la vie quotidienne des populations, où se joue la mobilisation contre les dangers, où se joue le développement. Ceci confirme la justesse et l'utilité du pacte pour le futur proposé par CGLU. Troisième élément de leçon, sans solidarité entre tous et à tous les niveaux, il n'est pas possible de venir à bout des dangers auxquels on doit faire face. Tous les pays se sont tournés vers la solidarité entre leurs citoyens pour faire face à la pandémie. De la même façon, CGLU est d'avis que sans solidarité internationale et sans partenariat entre tous, il n'est pas possible de faire face à des crises majeures comme la crise de la pandémie COVID-19 ou comme la crise climatique. C'est pourquoi CGLU soutient le renouveau du multilatéralisme élargi à tous les niveaux de la gouvernance publique, tel que proposé dans le rapport de vision UN 75. Et nous pensons que CGLU soutient ce rapport. Mais la dernière leçon que cette crise nous a aussi enseignée, c'est qu'il faut un minimum d'autonomie et de sécurité d'approvisionnement pour pouvoir faire face efficacement à une crise. Ça veut dire que l'ouverture à tout vent au marché international n'est certainement pas la seule réponse possible pour faire face à des crises de ce type-là. Parce que si on ne sait pas répondre aux besoins élémentaires des populations, alors toute crise de ce type se transforme rapidement en crise économique et sociale. Il est donc souhaitable que toute perspective d'avenir vers un agenda commun intègre cette exigence d'un minimum d'autonomie au niveau des territoires. Alors, nous avons un certain nombre de personnes que nous avons invitées pour s'exprimer sur cette question. Je voudrais d'abord passer la parole à Madame Victoria Alsina, ministre de l'Action étrangère et du gouvernement ouvert du gouvernement régional de Catalogne. Qu'est-ce que vous nous proposez comme perspective d'avenir, Madame Alsina?
Hello, merci beaucoup. Distinguished representative of the UN agencies, presidents, mayors, representative of networks, dear colleagues. dear colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to express my condolences for the family and friends of Jovenel Moïse, President of Haiti, and to the relative of George Makudo, Mayor of the city of Johannesburg. We are deeply sad and sorry for their loss. I want to continue saying thank you to the organizers of the high-level political forum on sustainable development, because once again, another year, they enable us to meet and to gather and to reflect together on how we should move forward in this important path in which we need to promote collaboration. I think that the pandemic, at the end of the day, brings something that is good, in the sense that it helps us to understand that local challenges at the same time are global challenges and the other way around. We better understood that public challenges connect the global north and the global south, and that show us how interconnected we are in the world we live. I think that this made us understand that we really need to change the way we govern. We need to put the institutions in front of the multiple challenges that we are facing. And to be able to move forward these sustainable goals and to be able to promote sustainability and digitalization and all things that are now clear that are part of the future, we really need to improve a few different things. I think that public-private collaboration and collaborative governance, and to change the way in which we manage networks and we manage services, is an important piece of the cake. I think that transparency, but more importantly, open data and share what we know, share what we want to do in order to take or to improve or to move forward a better decision making based on evidence, right? I think that the importance of science is also part of this picture, and also the need that we need to learn how to really use the collective intelligence that is distributed among society. We need to improve the participation mechanisms that help us to understand not only how we need to collect people, opinions and preferences, but also the collective wisdom that is out there. And I think that an important piece of this is multilateralism. Which is the role that local and regional governments can play in this scenario? We all know well that the Sustainable Development Goals were agreed by 193 states. But we also know that 65% of the targets that we need to accomplish in this framework really rely on local and regional governments in order to be fulfilled. I think that this is an important piece of information that we really need to consider in order to move forward in that direction. Local and regional governments indeed have shown to us that they are doing a remarkable job in localizing and in moving forward this agenda. But it's also clear that we need to give them, we need to allow them to have the right tools to do that. So it comes without saying that competences and funding, it's something that we should not overcome. We should really move forward. It's also true that we need to sit them in the global decision-making table. I think that local governments and regional governments, we are ready to take this responsibility. We need to strengthen the multilateralism, but also between us. So I think that collaboration at the local and regional level is also fundamental. As I said, we need to use the collective intelligence. We need to work with the civil society. We need to work with companies. And I think that back home here in Catalonia, we have a good experience in that sense. We strongly believe in this agenda. And this is why a few years ago, we joined forces with more than 300 people representing around 30 Catalan, both public-private organizations. And we signed the Catalonia 2030 Alliance. This is an agreement to compile and to move forward this agenda. And I know that a lot of regions and local governments follow the same path. I want to encourage all of them to collaborate and to use technology and to promote the right experiments, to really understand what works, what doesn't work, and to move forward from there. I want to thank you all for your presence in this forum. I think that it's very important that we continue these connections, even if we need to meet online. And I would also like to wish you all a good recovery from the pandemic, for you, for your families, and for your country. As once President Obama said, we are not afraid about the future. We came here to shape it. So thank you so much for inviting me into this panel.
Thank you, Madam Alsina. I would be interested if you could put on the chat the Catalonia 2030 Alliance text. It would be very good that people have it.
Absolutely, we will share it in the chat now.
Thank you. Can we ask then Mr. Carlos Martinez, who's still in Spain, within let's say 5 to 7 minutes to give his perspective?
He's not with us, Jean-Pierre. So you
He's
can
not
move
with
to,
us. So,
no.
So we move to Mr. Rodas Moza Ferry, Forum of Mayors of Asia. Are you here?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you to allocating time to my presentation. Hello and greeting from Tehran, the Permanent Secretariat of Asian Mayors Forum. At the beginning, let me express my deep and sincerely condolence and sympathy to the family and survivors of Mayor of Johannesburg. I am delighted to be participating in this outstanding event on behalf of the mayors and city leaders from more than 140 cities in Asia who are members of the Asian Mayors Forum. This forum is founded in 2008 at the suggestion of the current mayor of Tehran and with the great support of more than 100 mayors and also municipal high-profile officials. AMF pursues lofty goal, active participating in global dialogue, understanding peace, coexistence, and development through urban diplomacy and technical cooperation. AMF also attempts to improve the citizens' quality of life, urban infrastructure, and facilities Asian cities. Our main goal is realizing a better city and a better life, which will be achieved through endeavors to make integration and convergence among Asian cities. My dear colleagues and friends, in a world that is becoming more and more urbanized, mayors and city leaders play and must adhere to a key role as mediator between citizens and national governments. They are located at the front line of the task of engaging with local, national, as well as regional and international challenges to improve the general situation of humanity. No doubt, fulfilling this vital responsibility and being committed and accountable to the people and the other key stakeholders will not be possible without the proper inclusive interaction and cooperation, as well as without the real support of central governments. Also, role of public trust and participation should not be overlooked. I believe, despite the fact that many efforts made by the international community and urban diplomacy activities, unfortunately, mayors and other local leaders have not yet managed to find their real proper place in the hierarchy of national and international policy and decision-making process. This seems to be partly due to the fact that global policy-making mechanisms are reluctant to accept them, at least in our region in West South Asia. Particularly, the national governments have not yet formally recognized the importance role of citizen and local urban officials' participation in anticipate, diagnosis, and management of global, even national challenges and priorities. However, city officials are constantly trying to influence and enter to the decision-making cycle so that international organizations active in the field of local governance can bring their promise to the forefront best. After all, confronting all crises and natural disasters require an integrator convergence and synergy of all stakeholders' origin of effect in local, national, and international development. Having considered all above, I propose as a matter of urgency, establishing a local global body consists of representatives of from central and local governments, regional and international activities, regional and international initiatives with policymaking and supervision authority to search and identify real challenges, trends, and anticipate crises and disasters, and then apply preventive and secondary measures. I sincerely appreciate for inviting me to this fruitful and valuable meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your insistence on city diplomacy and on convergence of views. And we welcome your proposal, but of course, it is also part of the whole proposal of the UN to boost cooperation and multilateralism across the world. May we have now Madam Mariana Camisa from Buenos Aires.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. First, of course, extend our condolences to the people of Johannesburg. And then I would like to thank UCLG and the Global Task Force for the invitation and for hosting once again this event where cities can share their experiences and learn from each other. Definitely over the years, Buenos Aires has taken these opportunities to improve its work on the localization of the SDGs. We're very proud to announce that yesterday we presented our third BLR. Since our first one, published in 2019, we have added new resources and elements to promote the community of practices around the SDGs, accountability, and public access to information, based on the lessons we have learned from other cities around the world and network guidelines like this UCLG and UN Habitat 1. The 2021 BLR reports on the SDGs prioritized by the high-level political forum, and it also provides a roadmap for the social and economic reconstruction and the future of Buenos Aires. As we all know, the crisis caused by COVID-19 required the rapid adaptation to an ever-changing context and the meeting demands of the new public goods, the acceleration of urban trends as digitalization and the transformation of cities for people, and the development of a new social contract between the public and private sectors, civil society, the scientific and academic communities, and the citizenship. And although today's global scenario claims for a reanalysis of government priorities, in Buenos Aires, our Horizon and 2030 targets are still the same: a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and diverse city that promotes talent, creativity, and that offers a better quality of life for all its inhabitants. So to achieve this city vision and build our agenda for the future, we have established three main priorities. First, the comprehensive well-being of our 3 million inhabitants and the 3 million people that visit the city every day. Then the need to approach labor and education from a holistic perspective to boost social and economic development in Buenos Aires, and the city transformation, both digital and urban, especially following the 15-minute city model. Also, a key pillar is good governance and collective intelligence to accomplish the SDGs and these priorities. So we seek to enhance the attributes of good governance by establishing government priorities, clear objectives, and measurable goals through permanent accountability process. A great example of all of these meshing together is our 2050 Climate Action Plan and our Climate Action BA platform that are both aligned to the SDGs and to the Paris agreements. The city government launched in collaboration with C40 its third climate action plan which establishes a roadmap with short, mid, and long-term goals to reduce present and future climate risks, achieve a fair distribution of environmental, social, and economic benefits, and a 53% reduction of GHG emissions by 2030 and 84% by 2050. The formulation and design of this plan involved the generation of climate data for robust, coherent, and transparent analysis that would allow the inclusion of evidence-based policies. So we opened 40 public environmental data sets in our platform, that it's also a great resource to generate new knowledge along our stakeholders in the city. Also, these data sets were selected in collaboration with open government and environmental experts, and the result of this co-creation process is an open source website that offers the latest news on the main climate initiatives. Of course, the city's 2050 action plan with 24 climate change mitigation and adaptation actions and targets, our reduction targets for 2030 and 2050, the 40 data sets that I was mentioned, and other resources and initiatives proposed by civil society groups and citizens, so we can all achieve our climate targets together. So the platform creation process was thoroughly documented, so it can be replicated in other cities, as well as the website, and I will share it in the chat, as well as our VLR 2021. I invite you all to download it and check out the new resources and continue to share your experiences so we can all achieve the global goals together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana, because I just wanted to ask you to put them on the chat, so you did it before I did. And really, we appreciate that you are delivering your third VLR. This is very interesting, and we appreciate all that you are doing in terms of prioritizing cities for people. This is very good. May we call now Mr. Hassan Kilka, Mayor for Karafay.
Thank you very much. I want to speak Turkish.
Okay.
Çok kıymetli katılımcılar, Türkiye'den 10.000 yıllık medeniyetin izlerini taşıyan Rumi'nin şehri olan Konya'dan Karatay ilçemizden hepinizi selamlıyorum. İlçemizde yaklaşık 350.000 vatandaşımız ikamet etmektedir. Sanayi ve turizmin yanı sıra tarım ve hayvancılığın da gelişmiş olduğu şehrimizde yaklaşık 40.000 mülteciye ev sahipliği yapıyoruz. Seçilerek iş başına gelmemizle beraber tüm insanlığın ortak hedefi olarak sürdürülebilir kalkınma anlayışı ile yeni dönemde yapacağımız çalışmaları Birleşmiş Milletler'in belirlemiş olduğu 17 sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedeflerine uyumlu olmasını sağlamayı amaçladık. Bu kapsamda belediyemizde Dış İlişkiler Müdürlüğü oluşturarak küresel hedeflere uluslararası kuruluşlarla işbirliği içinde ulaşmayı hedefledik. Bu noktada UCLG, MEVA ve Türkiye Belediyeler Birliği işbirliği içerisinde gönüllü yerel değerlendirme raporu VLR hazırlık çalışmalarına da başladık. UCLG, MEVA yetkilileri tarafından belediye personelimize VLR hazırlama eğitimleri verildi. Katılımcılık anlayışı içerisinde dış paydaşlarımızın ve iş paydaşlarımızın desteğiyle hazırlamakta olduğumuz VLR çalışması mevcut faaliyetlerimizin bu 17 hedefle ne kadar örtüştüğünü tespit etmeyi amaçlamaktadır. Son aşamasına geldiğimiz VLR çalışması sayesinde memnuniyetle dile getirmeliyim ki bugüne kadar Karatay halkına yönelik yaptığımız çalışmaların büyük oranda küresel hedeflere katkı sunduğunu görmekteyiz. Ancak bununla kalmayıp geliştireceğimiz eylem ve politikaları VLR süreci ile ortaya çıkan tablo sayesinde şekillendirmek istiyoruz. Özetle yerel yönetim olarak yapacağımız her türlü faaliyetin küresel hedeflere ulaşmasına yardımcı olacağına ben inanıyorum. Tabii 17 kalkınma hedefini biz 4 ana başlık altında toplamış olduk. Bunları çevre, ekonomi, eşitlik ve sağlık olarak sunabiliriz. Tabii bunlardan şöyle yaptığımız hizmetlerden kısaca bahsedecek olursak kalkınma hedeflerimizden 6. başlıkta mesela tatlı su çeşmeleri var. Şehrimizin her yerinde biz ücretsiz halkımıza tatlı su imkanı sağlayabiliyoruz. Yine 7. başlıkta başlığa denk gelen güneş enerji santralimiz ki şu anda tüm tesislerimizde, parklarımızda tükettiğimiz enerji kadar enerjiyi biz güneşten alıyoruz. Güneş enerji santrallerimizi kurduk ve tamamladık. Yine 14. başlıkta başlığa karşı gelen obruklar var şehrimizde bizim. Obrukların korunmasına yönelik idari kararları almış durumdayız. Yine 15. başlık altında endemik tür olan ve dünyada sadece Anadolu yaban koyunu olarak bilinen yaban koyunlarının korunmasına yönelik ciddi çalışmalar yürütüyoruz. Yine 9. başlığa denk gelen altyapı çalışmalarımız şehrimizin her yerinde çok yoğun bir altyapı çalışmaları yürütüyoruz. Sıfır atık çalışmalarına oldukça önem veriyoruz. Sıfır atık çalışmalarıyla özellikle doğada ağaçların kesilmesine, doğadaki geri dönüştürülmesi gereken tüm materyaller toplayıp bunları ekonomiye kazandırmış oluyoruz. Yine kardeş şehir ilişkileri kurarak kendimizi geliştirmeyi hedefledik. Şu ana kadar da birçok şehirle kardeş şehir ilişkisi kurmuş olduk. Yine anaokulları inşa ediyoruz. Alzheimer merkezimiz var. Şehrimizdeki tüm Alzheimer hastası olan yaşlılarımızı bir merkezde toplayıp onları bakımını, onların rehabilitasyonunu sağlıyoruz. Yine engelsiz yaşam merkezimiz var. Tüm engellilerimize yönelik çalışmalar yürütüyoruz burada. Emekli konaklarımız var. Tüm emeklilerimizi belli bir alanlarda onlarla hoşça vakit geçirebilecekleri mekanlar oluşturmaya gayret ediyoruz. Aşevlerimiz var. Zirai atık ambalaj toplama projemiz var. Tüm sahada, tarımsal alanlarda zirai atıkları bir proje kapsamında topluyoruz. Yine de katılımcıların bahsettiği gibi COVID-19 ile ilgili ciddi çalışmalar yürüttük. Bu kapsamda COVID-19 güvenli belgemizi tüm tesislerimizde alarak güvenli bir çalışma ortamı yürütmüş olduk. Yine çölyak hastalarımıza yönelik glutensiz ekmek ürettik ve bunu şehrimizdeki tüm halkımıza çok ücretsiz bir şekilde yaydık ve hatta birçok ile de buradan göndermiş olduk. Toplu ulaşımla ilgili, kooperatifle ilgili değişik çalışmalarımız var. İnşallah bu çalışmaları 17 başlık altında bize sunulan kalkınma ilkelerini, hedeflerini yakalamak için daha da artırmayı hedefliyoruz. Ben hepinize buradan teşekkür ediyorum.
Merci beaucoup pour votre contribution. On a compris que c'est autour des ODD que vous avez concentré votre action et que, évidemment, même si les ODD sont de portée universelle, vous avez voulu contextualiser leur mise en œuvre à votre contexte. Et je pense que c'est un conseil qu'on donne à tout le monde. Et aussi, vous avez voulu que ces ODD soient abordés suivant une perspective programmatique. Et ça, c'est aussi quelque chose qu'on recommande fortement à tout le monde. J'aimerais maintenant donner la parole à M. Berry Urbanovic, le maire de Kitchener au Canada. Berry. Berry, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami Jean-Pierre. It's a real pleasure to join all of you. And in beginning, I too would like to offer my personal condolences to the people of Johannesburg and South Africa. Very close friends with Canadian cities and in our partnership with Salga. And also to the people of Haiti on the tragic assassination of their president. As I think many of you know, there's a large Haitian population in Canada, and FCM has had a long history with cities in Haiti. particularly since the earthquake about a decade ago. So this is no doubt a difficult time in both those countries for the local government movement. I really wanted to take a few moments today to just reflect on today's meeting and how far we've come as a movement. And I know people like Jean-Pierre and Lucy and others who have been here since the early days know the work that Emilia and the team at UCLG have done collectively with all of us over the past decade. But at the end of the day, it needs to start somewhere, and it starts with that leadership, both at a staff and at a political level, in order to see the advances that we have collectively made at the United Nations, particularly, in general, but particularly during the period of the annual high-level political forums, as well as with the national meetings that occur in September. And so I thought it was important to reflect on that, to think back to the early days of when we would come to New York. We would endeavor to speak about issues that mattered to cities, to ensure that national governments understood that cities mattered. And we would, barely find a room several kilometers away from the United Nations where we could find a hotel space in order to have a side meeting and in order to tell our story. And now that we look, fast forward to 2021, after a lot of, I'll say, blood, sweat, and tears that have collectively gone into it, we are welcomed into the United Nations. Local and regional governments and the work of UCLG and all of our partners in the Global Task Force are welcomed into the United Nations. And we have an opportunity to directly not only influence the agenda, but increasingly grow the role that that cities and local and regional governments are playing. And so I wanted to, in particular, thank those on the call today from the UN family for opening this space up for us so that we could do the work that we've been doing. But I would be remiss in saying that if I didn't acknowledge the incredible contribution of our constituency. Earlier today, Emilia referenced that even though we're virtual, and sometimes virtual is easier, sometimes it's worse. I know personally, I found for me, it was easier to be in New York because I wasn't expected to be in 2 or 3 meetings at the same time when it's virtual and people don't accept excuses. And so I really want to acknowledge the constituency for its ongoing commitment to ensuring that our voice is heard and that local governments continue to work towards a seat at the table at the United Nations. Finally, I do just want to acknowledge the staff for the incredible work that has been done, the delegation, the events that have been planned. Today's Local and Regional Governments Day, the forum that's going to follow on Monday and Tuesday, and all of the various events that we're participating in, and the voice that we are bringing to everything that we're doing. And so, Mr. Chair, if I may just say thank you to you and to all who have participated. And certainly from a Canadian municipal perspective, I look forward to the advancements that we've made and will continue to make in the years ahead. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Berry. C'est vrai que je me rappelle le moment où on faisait la queue derrière les ONG pour pouvoir, et même la cour aux ONG pour pouvoir participer à des réunions aux Nations Unies. Et je dois avouer que le chemin parcouru est un chemin remarquable, mais c'est un chemin qui vient aussi de ce que les collectivités territoriales ont démontré de plus en plus que sans leur action, l'action publique ne pouvait pas atteindre la portée que les autorités nationales voulaient. Donc, cette conscience collective est quelque chose qui vient à point nommé et ça nous met aussi en situation de plus grande responsabilité pour aussi défendre le multilatéralisme qui nous a portés jusqu'ici dans un monde que nous aspirons comme un monde de paix qui malheureusement a encore beaucoup trop de crises. Et nous souhaitons que les collectivités territoriales, par la diplomatie de ces collectivités, participent à restreindre ces crises et à faire en sorte qu'on soit dans un monde où la concorde entre peuples prend le pas sur la compétition de tous contre tous. Merci beaucoup pour cette perspective pour le futur. Et maintenant, je redonne la parole à Lucie pour conduire la fin de cette rencontre. Merci. Lucie.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. And I just want to really kind of echo the comments that both you and Barry have just given in that final slot of this meeting and take us right back to the beginning, because I think, it has been a journey. I think many of the points that Jeannie was making in the session earlier today around the importance of partnership and how you have to work at partnership and you have to work to do things together really resonates very strongly with us as a movement. And I think we have come strongly through that. And I think the caliber of the speakers and the participants and the colleagues who've joined this call today really shows us two things. One, that as a group and as a movement, we're still very keen to learn, that there's a huge opportunity for us to learn from each other. But there's also an opportunity, and this has come in part from the online, but comes also from our physical opportunities to meet. There's a real value for us as a sector in building coalitions and partnerships with other actors and other stakeholders who also have a stake to the city and to the local authority and to the territory. And I think, we know that we operate in a very complex sector. And I think today's meeting has really highlighted really clearly how much we need to reach out to others, how there's real value in us working together. And how, we really have started to come into our own as a kind of more recognized partner and maybe just kind of completing the circle. Clearly today was very much about us exchanging, it was about us learning, but it was also about us engaging with the UN. So I would also like to thank the colleagues from the UN who joined us for the meeting for their excellent contributions. And in particular for the conversation which is ongoing around a much closer partnership, as Barry put it, about having a seat at the table. And I think as local government and local and regional governments, this is very much our kind of objective. And it's something that we will continue to strive for. So I really want to thank everybody for the participation today. I realize we've run a little bit over. My final kind of parting words are to say, let's definitely stay in touch. And please don't forget the meeting of the Local and Regional Government Forum meeting on Monday, starting at the same time as this meeting started. And of course, please keep an eye out for the other events and side events and meetings that colleagues are running alongside the HLPF, because it's incredibly important that we keep the voice of local government strong at this forum and at other forums going forward. So thank you everyone for your contributions. Bye-bye.
Bye.